would call out again or knock on the door. I would have heard this if they did, as I was quite close to the front door. The voice did not come again, and I was a little nervous. In my experiences, voices calling one's name in the middle of the night is not a good thing. I mean, why couldn't they wait until the next day unless there was something urgent? So I put the TV on for some background noises and eventually drifted off again. Now, this could arguably be explained away as a fragment of a dream if it were not so real a feeling and didn't wake me up with such a jolt. Plus, when I told my boyfriend in the morning about it and how it freaked me out, to my surprise, he told me that as he was drifting off to sleep, he also heard a man's voice clearly call out his name, too. So I guess in theory, yes, it could have been a friend tipsy from a night out or locked out of their house, but we live quite far out of town and a long way out of everyone's way, and we don't know anyone locally. Plus, knowing our friends, they wouldn't simply call out once and go away. We also have mobile phones that they could have called or could have done the normal thing and knocked on the door. Then, on further questioning, my boyfriend revealed that the voice he heard sounded like it was right in his ear. The back room he was in is set up into the hillside a little, so it would be difficult and inconvenient to climb up the window to talk into it. Dogs also tended to bark at night in response to a sudden noise, and a person would have to walk past several of these to get to our place. There was no barking. We were both a little unsettled by this, especially being that it's Friday the 13th. Even though we are not generally the superstitious kind, we did throw around some ideas, such as a crisis apparition. Maybe someone that knew both of us was in some kind of trouble, yet the voice did not sound distressed, nor had anyone happened to anyone that we know of. Anyways, I would love to hear the others' thoughts and theories on what this could have been. Dual hallucination? The Ghost of 1011, Lansdowne. When I turned 18, I packed my bags, kissed mom goodbye, and headed for the biggest adventure of my life, Toronto. I was very excited, coming from Saskatchewan, and was ready for all the glitz and glamour of the big city. I unfortunately ended up living at 1011 Lansdowne, and it had a horrible reputation and was by far the worst, ugliest, and most awful building I have ever lived in. But the rent was cheap, and I fixed up my bachelor pad real nice and set into trying to make my way in the big city. I've lived there for about 8 months when a Friday the 13th started to come around. All month long, I had an uneasy feeling, and for 2 weeks straight, I would be sitting on my futon in my square little room, and I would see a dark shadow come down from the door along the south wall and circle the room, ending up in the bathroom, where it would seem to settle in the bathtub. Then I would see a kind of form sit up in the bathtub. To say the least, this freaked me out and chalked it down to the girl I was staying with, who claimed to have been raised by cult members who practice voodoo. I simply thought that she had brought an evil presence with her and asked her to leave, which wasn't easy. She was a real mean gal, that one. Eventually, she left, and I cleansed my apartment with some fresh sage and thinking this would resolve the problem. It didn't. Now, all month long, I had been joking with people in the building. Just watch, I said. On the 13th, they would find a body on the building. I got in a fight with my boyfriend on the 11th and went to stay with my friend and returned on the 13th. When I got to the building, there were police cars and a coroner van there. Needless to say, I was kind of shocked. The cleaning lady told me that a body had been found on the 15th floor, right above my suite. I lived on the 14th. She told me that the body had been there for some time, about 2 weeks. I laughed it off and said, "Right, sure." I went up to my floor and unlocked my door. The hallway light wasn't working, so I walked down the hall. I kept hearing crunch, crunch with every step I took. Crunch, crunch. My cats sure make a mess with their litters, I thought. The light in the kitchen bedroom wasn't working either. Crunch, crunch. I went into the bathroom and turned on the light. And was standing there wondering what all this white stuff was everywhere. When I realized it was moving. Maggots. Everywhere. I grabbed my cats and ran out, locking the door behind me. I left everything there and never went back. To this day, when I walk up on the 15th and 14th floor, I get chills. To imagine what I saw from those 2 weeks was probably the spirit of the person upstairs who had been found in the bathroom. Another time, last winter in fact, I was visiting Chrissy, a friend of mine on the 8th floor. Her floor is quiet most of the time, but there is a girl who brings lots of strangers by and would often have them waiting in the hallway. Needless to say, I wasn't surprised to see a man in black at the end of the hall when leaving Christie's. But my hair was standing on end and I got a horrible feeling of dread. I asked Chrissy to come out into the hall and we called to the guy who was leaning against the far door. "Hey, who are you waiting for?" He didn't move at all. And although it seemed like he was facing us, we could only see black. We then noticed it was not a solid kind of person. It was like a solid black fog in the shape of a person. We kept calling him, asking who he was, and telling him to get lost. He didn't move at all, nor shift his head to look our way, nothing. This whole time, we started to get an even heavier feeling of foreboding and evil. Chrissy sensed it too. Determined not to be scared, I started walking towards the elevators hallway between us and it. I couldn't even get to them. It's as if something was stopping me from getting any farther, and the feeling got worse. I started to back away quickly down the hall, never taking my eyes off of it, and decided to take the stairs. The lights were off all the way down to the 6th floor, and I ran for my life blindly in the dark, my heart ready to jump out of my chest. Eventually, I took the lift from the 6th down. My skin was still crawling as I left the building and went to the coffee shop. I hopped in the truck and called Chrissy on the cell phone. "Who or what was that?" I asked. And we both said at the same time, "I think it was a demon." Many other things have happened at 1011 Lansdowne, but by far these two were the worst. Some nights, that same feeling, that foreboding, a great evil on the loose, would settle over the building, and on those nights, I would stay far, far away, or hole up in Christie's until the vibe had cleared and was more or less back to normal. I'm so glad I don't live there anymore. My Bloody Mary experience. This dates back to 4 years ago when I was in 6th grade and was pretty childish. It was Friday the 13th and I was bored out of my mind, so I decided to attempt the whole little Bloody Mary ritual. I don't remember exactly why I chose to try it, but I do remember what went down vividly. I waited until midnight and locked myself in the small bathroom of mine, with the lights off, not using candles or anything. I chanted Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary 3 times, and gave a sigh of relief after nothing had happened. But before I could reach for the light, The porcelain seat cover on my toilet had slammed down, making a loud boom. And as you could imagine, because there was no cover on it, nothing could have put it down other than a person. After a minute or what seemed like 5 of tumbling with the lock, I ran out and sprinted straight down the stairs in tears because the slam had scared me so much. My parents woke up and asked me what happened, but I never told them anything. And that was my experience. The church camp. This is my first story. Thank you for reading. For as long as I can remember, I've always had a fascination for paranormal. I don't recall any events when I was a child, but had several experiences as a young teen and more growing up. The first experience that I can really pinpoint was at a church camp when I was 14 years old. I wasn't the only one who saw things that weekend, but my experience there was certainly eye opening, and even if I didn't believe, the events were indisputable. The camp was for the Friday and Saturday nights in April 2001. We arrived at the camp on Friday afternoon, nearing the evening. The first thing on the agenda for the weekend was cleansing the halls, dorms, and the group. We were not even allowed to take our bags through to the dorms until this had been done. We were told to close our eyes, and under no circumstances were we to open them. One of the church leaders said a prayer and blew on a horn for quite a while. My curiosity got the best of me, and I opened one eye ever so slightly. What I saw has stuck with me to this day. I saw tiny black shadows, a seemingly unending number, rushing out the open doors, rushing out the open windows, even rushing up the walls to get out of the windows right at the top of the hall. It was so captivating. If I wasn't scared, I'd get into trouble for having my eyes open. I would have watched for longer. I assumed at the time it was the negative energies being expelled. That day just happened to be Friday the 13th. And one of my church friends and I decided to go exploring the grounds after dinner. We had a quick tour during the day, but we had heard there were horses and we wanted to go have a look at them. We walked into the general direction of where the horses were supposed to be, behind the little field meant to be a small football field. We walked up the little path leading behind the fence field when we saw someone walking out of the building next to the field. This wouldn't have been anything strange if the person had walked out of a door. There was no door. The person had just walked out of the wall, a male dressed in decent Sunday best type clothing, completely white from head to toe, except for a small red spot near his mouth. My friend and I watched as he walked across the wide path. He stopped halfway, looked straight at us, and carried on walking. He disappeared when he got to the fence on the other side of the path. My friend and I decided to go explore near the little lake that was on the property. It was a lovely little lake with a path that led to a gazebo on a wooded island. Beautiful. We took a stroll around when we came across something even more disturbing than the white man. Luckily, being out in the open, it was very dark and no one saw us. We had stumbled upon what appeared to be some kind of seance. People standing in a circle, candles speaking in a strange language. Being petrified, we didn't stay to watch that one. We didn't want to be victims to a satanic cult if that was it. When we went back to the dorms, there was chaos there too. One of the other girls were screaming that she had seen a green man with worm or snake type hair outside her window. She was genuinely terrified, shaking, and too scared to even look in the direction of her window. The counselors had to deal with her, then had to rush to one of the boys' dorms as there was one boy who was seemingly possessed, ripping up the mattresses in an inhuman fit. It was a really crazy weekend. I never went to another church camp again. Thank you for letting me share, and I definitely be posting more of my experiences. Unexplainable things happening in our home. In the last few days, things seem to be getting weird around our home. The Sunday after Friday the 13th, my 15-year-old daughter was asleep in our room when a little stuffed bear she got from the fair a few weeks ago started to make noises for no reason. It was on her dresser, nowhere near her, and nobody else was in her room. It woke her up and she threw it out in the hallway. When I got up the next morning, I found the bear in the living room, which is nowhere near her bedroom, and couldn't figure out why. She told me what happened, and her father and I didn't believe her. Well, later that day, after they got home from school, we were in the kitchen, and the bear was in my room on the dresser where it started making its noises. Scared me a bit because nobody was near it when it did. It stopped and didn't do anything for a few days. Then this Friday night, my 2-year-old nephew was over for the weekend. They slept in the living room like a slumber party. Friday night, my daughter came into my room and said the bench in the living room was moving by itself across the floor. The lights were off, but the TV was on because they were watching kids' movies. I told her to put it behind the couch and go to sleep. She did, and then she heard knocking on the windows, and strangely enough, that little bear was out, which caused my nephew, who was playing with it, and started to go off again. He never touched the button in its belly to get it to make noises. She freaked out and threw the bear into my room, and it went off at around 5:30 in the morning as well. I drowned the thing in water and hung outside on the line. I have not brought it into the house. Sunday night, we had another issue. Again, my 15-year-old daughter was in her room and was woke up by a noise and looked up to see her small disco ball moving. Now, the disco ball is not plugged in, and there was no breeze in her room to cause it to move. She flew out of her room crying and sat in the hallway, refusing to go back into her room. I took the disco ball out of her room and set it on the table in the kitchen. Yesterday, I swear, I heard it make some noises and move a bit. Now, I have been in this house since 2006 and have never had many strange things happen like this. I do hear voices in my living room sometimes, and when I tell my husband, he says I am dreaming and to go back to sleep. I have sat home alone during the day while everyone has gone to school and work, and I hear things I cannot explain. Things falling, and yet when I go out to find out what it was, nothing has moved. My one neighbor told us that the land is part of his family's farm that was subdivided many years ago. He also told us of a few motor vehicle fatalities that have happened on the road entering the road we live on that happened around 30 something years ago. We are not far from the Mohawk River either, which is where part of the French and Indian War took place. There is a mansion just up the road from us that was part of that. Over the years, I have heard and seen some strange things I cannot explain here. I have a field behind my home as well where I have seen two different people standing by the trees, just looking around. One was a man dressed in Civil War looking uniform, and the other was an older gentleman who was wearing a flannel shirt and overalls. I later learned that the man in the flannel and overalls was my neighbor's father, who passed away many, many years ago. Things were calm for a few years, and then, out of nowhere, they seemed to be starting back in. They're scaring my 15-year-old daughter, and I am concerned as to why they are bothering her and not my 13-year-old daughter. I am worried because it is making her very uncomfortable, and she refuses to be alone now. The house was built back in the 1960s. I believe there are things beyond us that cannot be explained, but I'm not sure as to what would just bring it on to us like this so fast. Everything I've told you here is true. I have to figure out a way to get it to stop because it's causing fights between me and my husband as to how to handle this with our daughter. Twisting Ghost. Okay, so this took place during the honeymoon in June of 2014. I only remember this specifically because before the event happened, me and my partner had driven out to a small lake to see it. When we were driving back, we were joking about how it was taking place on Friday the 13th and how spooky it was. I don't know if the moon or the date plays any factor. My partner wanted to drive around the more heavily wooded areas before going home, since they had never been in that part of Virginia before. I knew the area since I drove through it nearly every day. It was very dark and around 9 p.m. Everything was fine and we were enjoying ourselves until we got to a large cluster of trees. I thought it was a plastic bag twisting around in the trees until I realized that plastic bags aren't as large an incline, so we could see the woods very easily. For reference, the trees were much taller than the two-story house behind it, so the plastic bag was very high in the air. It twisted around in an S shape like a snake before disappearing into the woods. It happened so fast that I could only see it, think it was a plastic bag, and then realize that it wasn't before it was gone. As we turned the corner beside the woods, me and my partner were completely silent before I muttered, "Holy shit," and then quickly asked, "Did you see that too?" We had seen the exact same thing and we had absolutely no idea what it was. Both me and my partner are sensitive and have had multiple experiences with the spirits. Theirs are usually good, mine, not so much. We only assumed that it was a spirit passing through, but we couldn't help but be completely stunned at what had happened. Any thoughts or theories? My spirit guide, Corey. For most of my life, I've always felt that I was being watched by someone. But until last month, I didn't know anything about my spirit guide. Going back to a little over a month ago, I was at a friend's house for a sleepover and somehow, someone started talking about spirits. A different friend of mine showed us how to contact them with a candle and a necklace. The beginning of a lot of trouble. Going out on a limb, I gave my exact address and we summoned my spirit guide, Corey. I spent the better half of the night talking with him, discussing problems and just relishing the fact that I was doing something I wanted to for so long, contacting spirits. Ever since that night, I can tell when I'm doing something that Corey does not approve of and there's trouble. Corey has two children, Stephen and Penelope, and a wife, Anne, who also stays close to me. They all died around my house back in the 1800s. For the sake of time, I will continue to the following occurrences a week later. The spirit that died close to my friend's house, Dominic, is extremely powerful. My friend contacted him that night, and ever since then, he has been a voice inside her head. He keeps her up at night with his laughter and gives my friend gruesome nightmares I can't describe. When she does something that annoys him, he doesn't hesitate to slap her or scream in her ears. One night, after she had annoyed him more than usual, he took hold of her wrist and squeezed until the bone was bruised. When I saw her the next day with a brace, I got angry and I wanted it to stop. I wanted my friend to be able to sleep and I wanted Dominic to be sent to the light. I contacted him myself that night and called him a lot of awful things that I shouldn't repeat here and then taunted him, saying, "You don't have the nerve to hurt me." Once my anger was vented, I ended the conversation to go take a shower. I thought I saw something in the reflection of a garage can lid, so I looked closer and I saw an enormous man standing behind me, and he wasn't happy. It was Dominic. I whipped around to see nothing there at all. Corey was furious. He knew what I had done was dumb and dangerous, but at the time, I didn't see how dangerous it really was. Just this past Friday the 13th, I went back to that same friend's house for another sleepover. Nothing serious occurred until late that night. When I went, I knew it was Dominic. I showed my disapproval by swearing loudly and mentioning that I was completely and ever be. I hurt me. And Corey got angrier than ever. I can't see or hear Corey directly, but I could almost feel him saying, "You will regret saying this." Late that night, Dominic really began to display his anger just past the start of the witching hour. He told us that someone was going to die at his hands, and that he would possess my friend to do so. Terrified, my friend, the other participant at the sleepover, and myself all gathered in a circle with makeshift crosses to pray. As we prayed, my friend jerked away, hissing that the crosses were burning. I kept my calm somehow, and after a few minutes later, my friend was starting to drift as Dominic overpowered her. I kept my cross close and spoke to him until she regained control. Scared beyond what I've ever felt, my friend sat back down, nervous about what she could do if he fully took control of her. She described to me that how she could tell what he was thinking and how he wanted to break my back and how he was going to choke out our other friend. About half an hour later, at this point it's close to 2 a.m., Dominic was fed up. My friend gave us one final warning: get away from anything he can hurt you with. And then she was gone. Standing, I looked into the eyes of hatred, and as he went for a pencil, the other friend and I locked ourselves in the bathroom. Dominic whispered angry words at us about breaking down the door, but he clung to the lock, praying it would hold. Breaking through all of our strength like nothing, he broke the lock on the door with a knife, right as my friend's dad had awoken. God has kept us safe. I breathed relief as Dominic made a barely passed attempt at pulling off my friend, and then daringly went back into the bedroom with them. He had calmed down enough to have a conversation, during which I pleaded with him and was forgiven for the angry words. Corey had come back. He left us during the struggle. What I found was funny was that Corey still doesn't, and vice versa. They were never fond of each other. Before Dominic left, my friend passed out on her floor. He gave us one warning: never contact the other man who died around this property. I don't know how strong he is, but he can kill a living person without even thinking twice about it. I fear that I may be putting myself in danger in telling you this, and I feel the other man's hand on the back as I type. 2 nights ago, I felt a different spirit in my room, and I saw a different man in my house. Last night, as I tried to fall asleep, the other spirit pulled at my heart, trying to possess me. I felt my awareness slipping away, and I clung to my thoughts, hoping for Corey to come back. Whenever the other spirit gets close to me, Corey seems to be forced away. Corey just confirmed my suspicions today. The other entity is the spirit from my friend's house, and he wants me dead for reasons we do not know. As I'm typing this, I feel a hand on my back and pressure inside me, but I need to tell other people. Most of my friends don't believe in spiritual activity on Earth, so I needed more people to hear my story. I don't think I should contact the man to try and send him into the light. That may only open a barrier that that have kept him for killing me thus this. I think do is talk to Corey and my friend and trade ideas. One of my theories is that the man is somehow involved with Corey's son Steven, who made a lot of deals he still can't keep during his life. I just felt extreme pressure that I'm going to take as confirmation until I can contact Corey again. Finally, thanks for reading my story. I'm new to this site and I have experienced a lot of paranormal activity lately and I needed to share. If anyone was fascinated by this, I'll be writing again if anything else happens soon. Thanks again. Bedroom door opens on its own. My 9-year-old daughter has been having a creepy feeling in my living room for the past 3 months. I recently found some of my grandmother's belongings and with them. My grandmother died when I was 17. Today, my daughter came running out of my house to her brother's bus stop, telling me that her door opened by itself. I have felt cold spots in my bedroom before, and I've heard someone talking in my room. I also feel as if someone is watching me when I'm alone in my house. Once in a while, I will find a light on that I know I've turned off. Can someone please help me find out what is going on in my house? I've lived in my home since I was 12. I started to hear voices shortly after my grandmother died. It always sounds as if two people were having a conversation. Also, my grandmother died on Christmas Day of 1998. My father's mother died when I was 8, and my father's father died when I was 9. I hear the voices at odd times of the year, and it was constant for about 6 months after my parents moved out of my house. My daughter is also just starting to go through puberty. I don't know if that has anything to do with this. My daughter and I have also heard footsteps, heavy footsteps, going up the stairs, then down the hallway. I've also taken my cell phone and tried recording EVPs, but haven't captured anything yet. The heavy footsteps started when I started going back to school, and it only happens at midnight on every Friday the 13th. I do not practice any type of witchcraft, and I've never used a Ouija board. Odd feeling when Uncle died. I was driving back home from a road where I was working on. It was around 3:30 13th. I then got this odd, impossible to describe feeling. I looked in the car mirror, saying out loud, "What is this?" The feeling was something I've never felt before. It's not painful, but it was odd. It was similar to having the chills, but different. It was like the chills, but very, very different. I moved on, not thinking much about it. Just some weird feeling, I told myself. Then I got the news an hour or so later. My uncle had died. It wasn't until the next morning when I thought about the feeling I had. I called up my dad and asked when my uncle had died. He said around 3:45, the same time I got that feeling. It really creeped me out. So we drove to the town where he had lived. My parents used to live in that house right next to my uncle's. For the funeral, they stayed in the house. Well, he would always visit my parents. He would knock on the door once, open it, and say, "Hello." My mother was in the kitchen when she heard a knock and heard someone say, "Hello." But no one was there. At the funeral, they showed the last picture of my uncle with some of his family. Everyone's face was clear, but his was blurred. This was similar to my grandmother's last picture. Everyone's face was clear, but hers was blurred. I have never believed in this ghost crap, but this, I have no explanation. My aunt, the witch, and seances. This is my first story that I'm posting on this site, and I hope I don't bore you with its length, but I felt the need to explain a few things along the way. The story is a collection of events that happened to me or close family members that intertwine to form the account. Most of the events happened a few years ago, but if the details are sketchy, I apologize in advance. Feel free to ask questions and I'll answer them to the best of my ability. It relates to a particular family member and some seances that we have performed. I've always been interested and drawn to the paranormal, and I even have a family member who was a witch, and I would like to share some experiences with you. While I am drawn to the paranormal, there is no way that I would want any experiences remotely close to what happened to the witch, nor be part of anything remotely related to the happenings. The family member who was a witch was my grandfather's aunt, who was called Ksenia. She only died 10 years ago when I was 15. My family are Russian and escaped the revolution and lived in Harbin, China. Until communism came to China, they left in 1956. Harbin was essentially a Russian city, with most of the population being of Russian descent. As a young girl, Ksenia befriended a local witch who passed her knowledge to her before she died. Despite practicing witchcraft throughout her life, she still maintained her Russian Orthodox religion and beliefs and superstitions. One time, Ksenia managed to upset the domovoi, a house spirit associated to Slavic folklore, and found dirty handprints all over her washing. No children were in the house at the time, so that was ruled out. When we would go to Ksenia's house, she would always offer to tell us our fortune through playing cards or tea readings. Note that historically, playing cards are derived from tarot, and you are able to perform readings from them, or do a seance via a Ouija board. My aunt was severely negatively affected by one where a spirit, a murder from the Stalinist era, attached itself to her and harassed her for weeks and tried to strangle her at nighttime. Her card readings were always accurate to the day and the week. I know the layout she used and some of the meanings. However, I am nowhere near proficient enough to do a proper card reading, so refrain from doing so. She would also cast spells on people. Her own sons were excluded from this, and would always leave a token of some sort, a homemade doll or a random object, under her seat if she visited you, which was a spell. She once told my grandmother that she had this uncontrollable urge to do nasty things, usually via spells, and that a voice told her to do these things. Every time she tried to fight this urge, the voice would get stronger and would threaten her. She would then perform a spell or do some nasty thing to appease the voice. My grandfather, who is a snoop, once visited her and snooped in her room and found a booty of weird items under her bed. Voodoo dolls, snakes and bottles, and that type of thing. Over time, my grandparents distanced themselves from Ksenia, and they didn't agree and didn't like what she did and didn't want her to influence their grandchildren in any negative witchcraft way. I always have pleasant memories of visits with her as a child, but was aware of who she was and what she did. Many years passed, and at the ripe old age of 95, she was well into her 90s when she passed away. She was diagnosed with cancer and was given 2 months to live. She lived longer than the 2 months and eventually died on a Friday afternoon. With Orthodox religion, particularly the Russian one, religious celebrations are celebrated according to the Julian calendar and not the Gregorian calendar, current dating system in the USA. The Julian calendar is 13 days behind the Gregorian calendar, and as such, we celebrate Christmas in the 7th of January, which is the 25th of December now, and Easter is usually at the later date. Ksenia passed away on a Friday, which happened to fall on the 13th according to the Julian calendar. Those of the Orthodox faith also believe that a person's soul wanders the earth for 40 days after they pass away. On the 40th day, a mass is performed for that person to help their ascent to heaven. Her 40th day fell on a feast day, meaning that the Mass could not be performed. Two strange things occurred around her death, the date being Friday the 13th, and the absence of her 30th day Mass. Is it a coincidence? Given the life she led, or is something more at play here? Her son, who lived with her, shut up her room and left it be for many years after her death. When he remarried, he and his wife decided to clean out her room and use it for another purpose. When they did, they found the strange things under her bed and also string tied up underneath the mattress. The base of the bed was raised off the floor, and the flat part where the mattress lay were a series of springs. It was on these springs that the string was tied in a crisscross fashion. Knowing that this was one of her spells, they contacted a friend whose mother was also a witch. They were told that the spell was made to bring tension and conflict to the house, and to reverse it, they would have to burn the string and walk away from it, not looking back. After the spell was reversed, an apparition could be seen around the house, believed to be Ksenia. Not long after this, they both moved out. Years after she died, I would have been around 20 to 21. I'm now 26. We decided to perform a seance using a Ouija board. I was present along with my mother, aunt, and Ksenia's son. We tried to summon her, but nothing happened. We then decided to summon a random spirit who would be around. The strange thing about that session is that all dearly departed family members came through. We spoke to my great grandparents, my grandmother, and my uncle. It was really surreal. Thinking it's strange that all my family members came to us, we asked why they were all here. My great grandfather replied that they were waiting for someone. We asked about Ksenia and if it was her that they were waiting for. The answer was a resounding no. 3 months after the seance, my grandfather passed away. I like to believe that his wife and family were with him during his final hours to help him cross over. Since then, I've completed quite a few more seances, and every time we do them, we get family members contacting us. I've managed to contact my grandfather, and he is with the rest of the family. Whilst I have a conscious decision to no longer dabble in seances and the like, every time I have done one, it's been positive. It's been an uplifting experience to communicate and get messages from the family. I have never been threatened or anything negative come through. I know that my family, especially my grandmother and great grandfather, watch over me, and I feel blessed to feel their presence, even momentarily at these occasions and when I need them. Never have we been able to contact Ksenia, despite her spells. She was always someone pleasant to be around. She wasn't all that bad. Regardless, I don't think that I would want to encounter her spirit, lest it is sinister or invites something sinister. Thank you. Chatty spirits. This is my first post. So last Friday, something odd happened to me, the 13th of May. I got home from work late at about 11 p.m., chatted with my mom for about 10 minutes or so, and went up into my room to play Dark Souls while watching YouTube. After about an hour and a half of gaming, my mom texts me when she doesn't want to yell up the stairs at me, saying, "Are you okay? If yes, why are you yelling?" So, me confused by this, I walked down the stairs and I asked her what she meant by this message. She told me that 3 times, and it freaked both her and the dog out. I was baffled because I haven't said a word all evening, and to my knowledge, in Dark Souls 3, the word Ethan isn't in it at all. Just an odd thing that happened recently. Twisting Ghost. Okay, so this took place during the honeymoon in June of 2014. I only remember this specifically because me and my partner had driven out to a small lake to see it. When we were driving back, we were joking about how it was taking place on Friday the 13th. And I don't know if the moon or the day plays any factor into this. My partner wanted to drive around the more heavily wooded areas before going home, since they had never been in that part of Virginia before. I knew the area since I drove through it nearly every day. It was very dark, and around 9 p.m., everything was fine, and we enjoyed ourselves until we got to a large cluster of trees. I thought it was a plastic bag twisting around in the trees, until I realized that plastic bags aren't as large and wide as treetops. The trees were on an incline, so we could see the woods very easily. For reference, the trees were much taller than the 2 story house beside it, so the plastic bag was very high up in the air. It twisted around in an S shape like a snake before disappearing into the woods. It happened so fast that I could only see it, think it was a plastic bag, then realize it wasn't before it was gone. As we turned the corner besides the woods, me and my partner were completely silent before I muttered, "Holy shit." And they quickly asked, "Did you see that too?" We had seen the exact same thing, and we had no idea what it was. Both me and my partner are sensitive and have had multiple experiences with spirits. Theirs are usually good. Mine, not so much. We only assumed that it was a spirit passing through, but we couldn't help but be completely stunned at what had just happened. Any thoughts or theories? Black dog haunting. Hey all, I'm new here. I have had a few paranormal experiences throughout my life, however, and I hope I find some people with similar experiences, or at the very least, I wish get these stories out to the world. I want to start with a black dog. I'm awful at being concise, but I'll try my best. First encounter. I was around 2 or 3 years old. We live in Holliston, Mass at the time. My folks were out that night, and the neighbor lady was babysitting. I shared a bedroom with my older sister, and I'd already been asleep before the event happened. I woke up in my race car bed to a whooshing noise that filled my head. It sounded like a bit like car tires rolling down a gravel drive with heavy reverb, or like wind blowing across your ear, but in an unnatural pulsating frequency. At this time, my eyes were transfixed on the closet door, which hung by streetlight moonlight from the window. As the noise grew louder, the closet door was pushed open from the inside. Dog there, half out of the closet, half still in, looking at me. I screamed. The hallway light came on, and my parents rushed in to comfort me. Second encounter, about 5 or 6 years old at the time, living in Greenback. My sister, who had always been kind of a jerk to me, and now we're playing some sort of hide and seek game or just horse playing. And I can't remember. She shut me in a closet and somehow managed to lock me inside. I banged on the door and begged her to let me out for a few seconds. Then the noise came. The whooshing, pulsating, gravelly noise. This time the black dog spoke to me. I didn't see him this time, but it was pitch black in the closet. I can't remember what exactly he said. I was scared to no end, but I remember him being very cocksure and he was taunting me. This encounter was so traumatic, I can't remember the resolution, that is. I don't remember what happened once I finally got out of the dark closet. Third encounter. I was around the same age at the time, but no more than 8 years old, living in the same place. This time, he came to me in a dream, but it was the only dream in which I have ever experienced sleep paralysis, or rather, that specific incapacity to shout or even speak within the dream. I feel like this was the only time he held actual physical power over me, even though it was only a dream. In this dream, I was running out of my house towards a playground that stood in the middle of the communal green space in the middle of the neighborhood. As soon as I got to the end of my yard, under a tall pine tree, the black dog appeared between me and my friends, who were already at the playground. This time, he just stood looking at me like the first time at me, but never doing so. But when I tried to yell at my friends or yell back towards my house, I was unable to. And then I started to phase out of the dream into consciousness, still trying to yell, and I never could. Since then, I've had very few, if any, encounters. I remember a few times in the dark where I heard the noise starting up, and I was able to wish it away. I took an interest in the supernatural in my middle school years and mostly abandoned all by the ladder of high school. I read in some library books about black dog myths, all involving a glowing eyed, sulfur breathing death omen who would scratch at people's doors and such. The black dog to me was never a death bringer. It always seemed like he was somebody to me, personally. However, he hasn't visited me in some time. Starting in college, I dated a girl for 7 years, and she was a bit more open to supernatural and paranormal topics than I am. She was the first person I opened up to about the black dog, and she urged me to consider past life events. She performed a hypnosis on me. Through hypnosis, I was able to produce a very vague idea of this dog's name, something like McGregor or McCain, and that I owed him something. Also, that I lived in England and I was in love with Anne Boleyn, and I was a werewolf who have up in my life as a man to serve as a protector of the forest. When I woke up, I asked her who was Anne Boleyn. I didn't know. And she told me and showed me pictures, and I said, that's not what she looked like in my head. I've never stopped thinking about him. He's a part of me. But I have zero to few encounters with him directly in my adult life now, until this year. I am 27 years old, almost 28 years old. I live in Knoxville. I am married now to a different girl. Normal, not superstitious, thank God. One Friday night, that I had a very vivid and mostly surreal dream of a black dog attacking me. It should be stated that I am an animal lover, and I have never been attacked by a dog outside some house that is not mine. This dream was hard to remember upon waking up, but I recall him gnawing my arm as I tried to gouge my fingers into his eyes. But within this dream, there was never the noise, and I did not feel that inherent fear. But when I woke the next morning, I realized it had been the full moon called Wolf Moon on a Friday the 13th. The latest event rekindled my obsession, and I began to look up black dog mythologies online and found information about black dog lore from England. A dog called Trash or Striker. It said that his feet point backwards and make a splashing noise when he walks. While the name doesn't match up, the splashing noise is eerily close to what I experienced as a kid. I think this in hopes that someone has had similar experiences or offer any analysis of this. Here are a few things that I could share that may be of importance. I was in the proximity of the home of the myth to Scotland, a justification for the dog's Scottish name. The splashing noise, the memory of a damsel of importance who I didn't cognitively know. My family's direct lineage from John Alden, the wolf moon on a Friday the 13th, as it relates to my memories as a werewolf. Haunted Theater. Hi, all, first time posting, so I hope I don't break any rules. Anyways, here's my story. I work at a movie theater for over 4 years now, and throughout that time, many of the staff have had weird vibes and stories of paranormal experiences. They range from seeing a little boy wandering upstairs in projection to hearing voices. For the first few years, I never bought into it much. Year, I've had a few experiences myself that's convinced me otherwise. The first experience that stands out to me most. So I'll start there. I am the opening manager at our theater. When I open the building, one of the first things I do is go upstairs and turn the lights on. I'm lazy and always take the elevator up the first floor rather than walk the stairs. Early last year, I would come in, and as I walked to the elevator, the doors would open on their own. I didn't press the up button. I would take the elevator up, turn the breakers on, walk back to the elevator. The doors would again open on their own. This went on for a couple months. I got accustomed to it, thinking it was my ghost bro just opening the door for me. I casually asked a few other employees if this ever happened to them, and they all said no. Anyways, one day, I come in the building after the door opening has happened for maybe 2 to 3 months. Again, the elevator door opens on its own. I get in, press the button for upstairs, and the door shuts. As soon as the door closes, a woman's voice says, "Hello," very loud and clear through the little red box that is calling the fire department. If you get stuck, this happened about a year ago, and I can still recall exactly how this woman's voice sounded. Hello, very clear. I'm spooked as hell, and I'm the only one in the building. But the elevators already take me upstairs. I never reply, and get out of the elevator fast, turn on the lights for the building, and head back. As I walk back, the elevator door opens on its own again. I consider taking the stairs, but for whatever reason, decide to take the elevator again. I'm curious as to what will happen, so I get in, press the down button, and wait. I contemplate talking back to it, but I just couldn't work myself up to do that. Something strange happens after. About 30 minutes later, my first staff member comes in, and I'm still spooked as hell and tell her the story. They are skeptical, but not entirely unbelieving. I tell the story to a few more people, and eventually the whole staff knows. Like I said, we all have our own thoughts and experiences by now. And after I told the story, the elevator never opened on its own again. It's been a year now, and not once had it happened. I've been alone plenty of times in it, and even tried saying hello back, but haven't had anything at all. I guess my main question is, what are your thoughts on talking about paranormal activities in relation to the activity itself? What I mean is, more things happen. I'm not positive, but it seems like the more we talk about it, the more stuff happens. At least for me, anyways. I've been talking and getting bad vibes a lot more lately. And the more I tell people about it, the more frequent it happens. But nothing as blatant as the elevator incident. If there's interest, I could share a couple more. Edit. Added more. Wanted to add a little more since there was a bit of interest. Sorry if it's kind of late. So, after the elevator incident, everything stayed calm for a bit. I had told the staff about what happened, and it seemed like as soon as I told the story, everything stopped. Eventually, most of our staff ended up leaving, and we had to hire new people. The new people we hired heard some of the ghost stories and started getting a little spooked out by it, and then random stuff started happening pretty frequently, on a weekly basis at least. This this is the most recent thing to happen to me and is sort of mellow. I was working a Friday night a few weeks ago. It was pretty slow. Nothing bad had come out, really, so we weren't too busy. I was bored. So when Theater 13 got out, me and an usher went together to go clean it. Like I said, it's pretty slow, so there shouldn't be too much shit to sweep in there. So we get into the theater and it's dark. The credits are rolling, and we hear a family at the top. So we talk in whispers at the bottom of the stairs so we don't disturb them watching credits. We hear kids yelling and laughing, and just keep bullshitting at the bottom, waiting for the credits to finally stop. Eventually, the movie ends, and the lights come on. We look up and try to find the family we heard, but there's no one. We were alone the entire time. We both look at each other with a "what the fuck" look on our faces. I ask him if he heard those kids yelling, and he tells me, yeah. That's why I was being quiet when we were talking. We clean up the theater quick and get the hell out. Theater 13 has always been one of the worst ones. A few weeks before, I was opening again. I think it was a Thursday. It's slow in the morning. So I only have one other employee with me to sell shit and get everything done for the first 2 hours. So I do my thing, go upstairs and turn the lights on, put money in the register and all that stuff. I start to check each theater. I have to walk through every theater to make sure there isn't any liability issues going on, like people tripping over shit lights not bright enough, etc. So I do my theater checks, and about three-fourths of the way done. Weekdays are slow as hell, so I'm taking my time. I eventually end up in a theater, and the advertisements are just playing on the screen. I remember it was a commercial for something, and this guy was playing piano and just killing it. I watched the guy play piano for 30 seconds, and while I am watching, in the top right corner of the screen very clearly, someone puts their hand in front of the projector. The hand was in the shape of a peace sign that kids would usually make, and it's just staying there. I stare at the shadow for a second, not sure if I'm actually seeing it, and turn around. The light coming through the projector window is bright, and I can't make anything out, but I get a bad vibe and bounce. I leave the theater and go to my worker and ask him if he's been here the whole time. He's still doing the opening work and tells me, yeah, why? I tell him my story and make him swear he wasn't in projection. Not that it would have mattered. These doors are locked, and I am the only one here with a key. So I get up to projection to make sure no one broke in or is fucking with me. I get upstairs and turn the lights on. Already getting bad vibes. Projection is basically a long ass hallway with projectors in it, as you can imagine. So I head down all the way, no one there. Still getting really nasty vibes, so I bounce and run downstairs. I know it sounds weird, but I didn't mistake what I saw. A hand clearly went in front of that projector, and there isn't any chance that someone was up there. Now, last story. So, we have to check each theater when we open. So, we also have to check each theater when we leave. So, I'm closing manager for the day and about ready to leave. This was probably 6 months ago before the elevator incident. So, I'm walking through a theater, and this particular theater is always colder than the rest. I mean, it's like at least 10 degrees colder, fucking freezing in there, but I can't mess with the AC, so it is what it is. Anyways, when we close, I'm basically making sure no one is sleeping in the theater, so I can set the building alarm and bounce. So I'm walking up the stairs, scanning the theater for anyone that might be asleep in the top row. I get about halfway up, and as I'm walking, the row in front of me has the armrest fall down. Not just one seat either, but like half the armrest in that row came down at once. They didn't fall gently either, but they went down fast. I stood there for a second and got out. Anyways, that's a few of what I've experienced. The staff has more stories, and I could probably think of a few more. Let me know what you guys think. This building isn't even that old, 15 to 25 years, without giving too much detail, but it definitely has some creepy shit going on. If you have any questions, I'll happily answer. Not willing to give the exact location, though. This is my workplace after all. Communication through the TV. All right, let me start off by saying I'm a skeptic. Never had many experiences I can attribute to the paranormal. Some weird occurrences, but nothing I could prove was paranormal. Last Friday night might have changed that. I was feeling a little depressed. Problem with schools, work, where my life was heading, my goals, money, general life stuff was all going through. Around midnight, my fiance and cat were passed out on the couch next to me while I was playing video games. The TV remote was on the table next to me and started changing channels and bugging out. Okay, no problem. I'll just go back to my channel. I did and continued playing video games. But then it happened again. But this time, I went to channel 532 and shut off. So I turn the cable box back on and immediately go to channel 532. It's a TV station called Ion. Never really watched it before. On TV, there was a movie playing that I've never seen and an actor I've never seen. The next words to come out of his mouth blew my mind. Everything will be okay. Don't worry. I immediately turned to my left and said thank you out loud. So, like I said, I never really experienced anything paranormal. But this was too big of a coincidence. The exact channel, those exact the remote bugging out for no reason, and the fact that it didn't happen again after I got the message. I don't know, guys. Did someone or something contact me? I feel like they did. I hope they did. Scissors and experience. What's up, paranormal? I posted this and let's not meet, but because it is a true encounter, but they suggested I share it here as well to reach the proper audience. The only people I shared the story with was the ones affected by it. For illustrative purposes, this happened when I was 12 or 13 years old. I'm male, currently 29. Around this age, parents start to test the waters with letting their kids stay by themselves for short periods of time. An hour here, maybe 3 hours there. For me, each period had strict criteria I had to abide by, depending on how long my parents were gone for. Doors were to remain locked at all times. I was not allowed to be outside of the house for more than 15 minutes at a time, and under no circumstances was I allowed to go off of our property. We had a yard field of about 4 acres around the house, so I had space to roam if I wanted to go outside for a little bit. I grew up being terrified at the idea of not falling asleep before all the other lights in the house went out. My room was at the front of a long hallway that led to the other rooms in the house. There were no doors at the back end of our home. My inner paranoia told me at a very young age that if anyone came into her house during the night, I was the first room they'd find. I'd usually be put to bed at around 9 p.m. or so my parents would follow suit around 11 p.m. The sound of them moving around comforted me and helped me feel at ease. I'd watch under the crack under the closed door for the warm, reassuring light coming down the hallway from the kitchen, letting me know that someone was still up. But some of the longest nights were when I tried too hard to fall asleep before they went to bed. The effort actually had the reverse effect, and I'd end up being too stressed out to fall asleep. Of course, I'd see the light under the door go out eventually, hear my dad's footsteps walk down the hallway to the far back of the house, and I was alone. This was around the same time that my parents let me stay up late on the weekends. They wouldn't harass me too much about being in bed early, as long as I didn't have class or something to do the next day. I used this to my advantage and started staying up all hours of the night, watching whatever the hell I wanted to on TV. After all, I was too scared to be in bed with all the lights off. It was my theory that no one would try to come into the house if they saw someone up and moving around, right? Before this, I never spent a huge amount of time being awake in the house in the middle of the night. My house felt very different than it did during the day, and we only been living in it for a couple years. Strange things began to catch my attention. I would hear noises that I never heard before. Most of these could probably have been explained to something else, like just usual noises a house makes from wind, etc. But at the time, I was super unfamiliar with it, and it creeped me out even more. Our house had 2 bathrooms, a guest bathroom just across the hall from my bedroom, and a master bath at the back of the house, adjacent to my parents' bedroom. Before the guest bath officially became mine, I'd bathe in the bathroom at the back of the house. Again, I was terrified of being alone at the back of the house. Oftentimes, I'd sprint halfway down the long hallway to the front of the house, trying not to pay attention to the glimmer of whatever might be in the empty, dark rooms I was passing at high speed. On more than one occasion, I'd see a similar glimmer at the entrance of the hallway while I was up watching TV. Whenever I jerked my head in the direction of the hallway, the glimmer would be gone. Some nights, I'd be so freaked out that I leave every light on and go lock myself inside my room. Even though I'd be in big trouble for leaving all the lights on, it was a small price to pay. The crack under my door would not be dark. Not tonight. On one Friday in particular, My parents let me know that for a good deal of the day. We're talking an unprecedented 4+ hours. It was Friday the 13th. My dad's birthday was coming up, so they had a parents only day planned with some other family members. As such, they were going to bed early because they had to be up and gone by 5 a.m. Being 100% nope interested in sitting in my room trying to fall asleep at 8 p.m., I went to the living room to keep myself and the house wide awake with a little bit of TV. At approximately 1 a.m., I heard it for the first time. Shink. That's the best way I can describe it. Very close to the front door, in the dark of the kitchen, I heard what sounded like metal on metal. A sound of two blades grinding together and clicking shut at the close. I was watching dumb made for TV movies about robots at the time, and while it put me on alert, I tried to pass it off as a poorly done sound effect from the TV. I listened intently for a few more minutes, heard nothing else, and disregarded the noise altogether. I did, however, flip on all the lights in the kitchen to make sure I could see into the room if it happened again. 2:15 a.m. Shink. This one was much clearer. I changed the channel after the robot movie had ended, and the TV was at a particularly quiet part. There were no disrupting in this time. Something had made that noise from within the kitchen, but I saw nothing when I nervously glanced inside. I grabbed the snack off the counter and walked quickly back towards the living room. As I crossed the doorway, the power flicked on and off twice quickly. Shink! This one came out more like a quick scrape wheeze of a sound, and it was close. I dropped my snack, where I stood and bolted for my room. Door locked. I hid under the covers until I eventually passed out. I woke up the next morning alone. Mom and Dad were gone to visit with the family, and I had forgotten about what had happened the night before. They had left me $20 on the counter for a pizza, and I was stoked. Pizza was a rarity, but it was the only thing around us that delivered. I called up the local Pizza Hut and had one delivered as soon as they opened. The driver looked pissed to be alive. Anyways, I paid the man and he was on his way. With pizza in tow, I sat down in front of the TV to enjoy my meal. Shink! Suddenly, the previous night's events came rushing back, stunning terror through me. I had completely forgotten about the noise. I was completely alone. Step away from the story, having been a skittish kid, I would ponder over ways to defend myself if I ever needed it. On those nights where I was up after the lights went out, I mentally walked myself through the house and imagined what item I could fend off an attack with. Front of kitchen, mini fire extinguisher, back of kitchen, knife set, living room, fire poker, bedroom baseball bat. While it was only a small comfort at the time to map out my pseudo emergency plan, I cannot tell you how thankful I was that I'd actually done it. Families make a fire drill plan for their kids. If the home ever catches on fire, you need a find a nearest weapon drill too. Shink. In an instant, I leaped out of my chair, crossed the entire living room, and ran like hell for my room. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and threw my dresser against the wall. In my room, I paced back and forth, nervously watching the door. Then it hit me. I knew exactly what it was. And even though I tried to convince myself that it wasn't, there was only one thing I can compare the noise to: the sound of someone with a big pair of metal scissors snapping them closed. The noise happened twice within about 10 seconds. It was getting much more frequent. They knew I was alone, and they were going to terrorize me before they came. Bedroom baseball bat. I swung open the closet door and picked up the baseball bat that represented the nearest weapon. For an hour, I listened through the door for any sort of sound, but nothing came. My nerves were about to snap, and it lit a fire in me that I'd never felt up until that point. God damn it! I didn't make this plan for nothing. If I was going down, I was going to beat someone's ass in the process. I flung the dresser off of the door, swung it open, and stomped with a purpose down the hallway, bat in hand. I did a full tour of the kitchen and foyer. Before returning to the living room, I slammed the bat on the floor and screamed, "Come out! Come on out! You motherfucker! I'll bust you right in the mouth!" Silence. The world was humming with the absence of noise. I could feel the vibration of the blood pulsing through my head. Shink! I suddenly realized the mistake I'd made. My confidence drained, and I just provoked, nay, welcomed, my attacker to come. I dashed for the front door, shink, threw the door open, shink, and sailed my ass right off the porch. I hit the ground and ran another 50 yards before I turned around to look. I saw a glimmer just inside the front door, but I was too far away to tell what it was. I noticed the neighbor's grandkids were over for the day visiting. Fuck the rules. I left our property and wasn't back until mom and dad were home. I didn't tell the neighbors about it yet, but I watched my house intently for any signs of someone coming out. Mom and dad saw me as they pulled into the driveway. While I ran back across the yard, I could already see my dad starting to turn red. He was pissed, but his anger quickly turned to concern. I breathlessly explained what happened before either of them went inside. Dad retrieved his gun from the utility room and combed the entire house. It was empty. Later that evening, I could tell that my father was contemplating whether or not I had made the whole story up to cover my ass. He toyed with me some, showing me that the pair of metal scissors that we had were still in the drawer. The three of us returned to the living room to finally clean up the pizza I'd splattered all over the floor. Shink. I shit you not. My dad looked at me, then shot a bewildered look at my mother. The noise came from the closet, gun in hand. He flung the door open and pointed down at the intruder in her house. An iron. Before my mother went to bed the prior night, she ironed some clothes out for her and dad. Our closet had a fold down ironing board and in closet plug for the iron. She forgot to unplug the iron when finished, and the trademark shink was the sound of steam coming out of the iron as water evaporated inside it. The wheeze, groan type noise I heard late Friday night came from the iron going off and coming on when the power flickered. After that incident, I became massively skeptical of a lot of seemingly supernatural occurrences. After all, finding out that your murderer was nothing more than a household appliance can do that to you. I like to think this whole stupid thing made me mature quicker, and I was no longer as paranoid about a great many things. A few years later, my family bought a computer for the first time. I rather enjoyed flipping off all the lights now when I watch TV or play on the computer. While chatting with a friend on AIM, I saw something out of the corner of my eye, a glimmer. Except I didn't jerk my head in its direction this time. I resisted the urge and just continued watching out my peripheral. I made out a distinct figure of a woman, translucent and light white. The figure has always been there ever since we moved into the house. When I turned my head in its direction, the figure dissipated and was gone. Yet I wasn't afraid. I talked with my mother about what I'd seen the next day. She shared with me that at a very young age, she had an experience with what she could only explain as a ghost. Her description and my experience matched right up. Apparently, we have our very own Casper. The Thousand Voices in the Woods. So, I'm just going to share with everyone my paranormal experience that I had. I'm new to Reddit and kind of curious to see what the thoughts can be on what happened to me. For a little background information, I grew up in the countryside of Mississippi. Ever since I was young, I've seen and heard strange things in the woods in my backyard. It's around the location where Hernando de Soto, the conquistador, explored, the old property of a plantation, and eventually a dairy farm that withered away with time. I have no mental illness, a good memory, and I was very successful in school and college. I'm the middle child of two other siblings, so I've always been the one that isn't involved and unnoticed. But here it goes. It was the year of 2009 and an early spring. I normally have regular sleeping patterns, but randomly wake up at 3 a.m. sometimes. This morning, I woke up at 3 a.m. I was in bed and kind of restless to fall back asleep. I noticed when I turned 3:15, something changed. I began feeling uneasy. My room seemed extremely still, and it was too quiet for comfort. From the woods in my backyard, I started hearing an uproar. Since I live in the country, I know what bobcats, coyotes, deer, and other animals sound like when they're making noises. I've even experienced a pack of coyotes howling before, but this was different. The screaming I heard started quiet and rose steadily from one spot in the woods. I jumped and went to the window. I live on the second story, so I can see the woods from my window. Soon, the screams became louder and louder. It sounded like 1,000 people screaming in torment, like a choir of torture and pain. I looked in the distance on the local road and didn't see any lights or cars where someone could be doing this. I lifted my window up in my room and it was even louder. It lasted, from what I could tell, for 3 to 5 minutes. Suddenly, everything just stopped. I jumped back into bed and tried to sleep. The next day, I spoke with my siblings and asked if they heard anything. My sister said she was up at 3 a.m. and didn't fall asleep till 5, but didn't didn't hear anything. It was Friday the 13th though. So maybe that has something to do with it. So what do you think happened? I'm not making this up. Lately I've been thinking about it constantly and it still freaks me out to this day. I'm just glad there's a community to share this experience with. My most recent paranormal experience. I just wanted to share my last paranormal experience in more details. I love reading these and thought I would share the freshest one. So in August, I couldn't sleep and went to the guest room to watch TV so I wouldn't wake up my husband. I finally fell asleep around midnight. I woke later to a man yelling loudly, during which my dog was barking like crazy. Someone's in the house! I ran to my toddler's room, grabbed her, and went into my other kid's room, combined with bathroom. Woke him up quickly, looked into the hallway, and saw no one. So I went to the master room where my husband was, locked the doors, and woke him up. I told him there is a man inside the house. He said the alarms aren't going off. I reluctantly searched the house and made sure there were no signs of entry. He laughed at me and we agreed I had a dream. And I felt silly for waking everyone up and freaking out the kids. The next morning, my dad called to let me know that my grandfather passed away around 1 a.m. I think it was him. The funny thing is, my grandpa lost half his hearing in World War II, and by the time he died, he was basically deaf and yelled to talk. Also, forgot to add the part that this happened on Friday the 13th. I don't think that really matters. I do understand the history of the date, though. It was a very special day for my family.
And she tell you that somebody just a couple hours ago talked dog with you?
Yeah, I walked in yesterday. I got what part of it moved?
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I'm gonna show it.
Ken, you got to get closer to me here. Come on. Smooch up to me.
Yeah. Snoop shit. I'm on camera. I'm on camera.
You're on camera.
Ow. I hit my knee on your table. BI claim.
Good luck.
You got what it is.
Thoughts and prayers.
I wouldn't do that because I can do that crap all the time.
You could be in that.
Oh, that's a her.
Yes. Somebody said about audio. I'm streaming to YouTube. She's streaming to Facebook.
All right, I'm starting, I'm going in to get the,
So I've got mine going, and I'm going to make sure we got audio here.
I'm going live. See if I'm working, because I'm not seeing my camera. Happy screen, there we go.
Yeah, almost there we go. Oh, we got it. We got audio.
Am I good?
Good to go. And whenever you're good, we'll start the show. You got Kevin's queued up for the video?
Intro music.
I don't know what this is.
Is that,
That's
that's one of
baby.
them. All right. So relax. We just got fun. There's nothing scripted.
Okay.
We just talk and cut out people.
Yes.
Just come to our living room and enjoy it. The only thing we don't
Alright,
have
we
is
are
a beer.
live
We
on
just use it.
Facebook.
Live.
Hello, everyone.
Oh yeah, we are live. Welcome to Abnormal Alabama, Abnormal Paranormal Panel. We have a spirit with us, Cat. And we have our geek squad over here, Catherine. And we have the haunted dog guy, Kevin. And we have a special guest. This guy,
Hold on.
Lewis Powell, drove from the Grange. I didn't hear he was playing at the time.
It was an accident. I'm still learning this
The
program.
Geek Squad geeked out.
We pride ourselves on being the least scripted.
Okay.
That's why.
Lewis Powell IV drove all the way from LaGrange, Georgia. Now, Lewis is an amazing fellow because he and I share a lot in common. Outside his beard, bushy and mine is not. Our haircuts are very similar, and but he loves history.
Yes.
And history is pretty much what you get into when you do the ghost hunting and ghost tours, what you're talking about that. We also, and he was surprised when he walked in the front door and he saw the word church. I think he about turned around and went back to the range at that moment. But it's supernatural.
Yes.
And a lot of people, I don't think really grasp, because it's like Kevin here. I like to pick on Kevin. We're buddies, so he don't mind. He's kind of afraid of a Ouija board.
Yeah.
Right, Kevin?
I just
You're not. You have a healthy
a lot
respect
of
for him.
problems.
Yeah.
But
they
people I
don't.
know that probably didn't use it correctly, and then they had some bad spiritual attacks.
But
Had
you
it
don't have
already
a problem with spirit boxes
Well,
and
they're
other
a little bit
tools.
safe. Those are safe to use. I haven't had a problem with them yet.
Are you sure?
Ouija boards sitting there with, and don't they supposed to put magic on Ouija boards to make them weird? That's the other thing.
No.
Yeah, you put them out
No.
That's why I always heard they put some kind of spell on anyway. But
No.
anyway, I just had a lot of
We
people.
put the spell on you, not on them.
Yeah, they're,
I just had people that had
But you know,
problems.
that's natural. You talk to the majority of people, you say Ouija board, no. They'll go ghost hunting, they'll do everything else, but you say Ouija board, and they run out the door real quick. Because I blame the Hollywood, really. But,
Yeah, that's just
and we talk exorcism a little bit, you know,
Yes.
and Hollywood is free dinner too.
Oh, yeah.
Through my life, I've been involved in exorcisms and minor exorcisms and house things. Nobody spins their head around any of that stuff. But you've got to sell it. You've got to romanticize it. So forth, and that's what they do. And unfortunately, people take it too seriously.
Yes.
But without going too far with that, we're going to get into. Is it okay to call you Bruce?
Yes.
Okay. We're going to get into your stuff here.
All right.
But 2 weeks ago, when you saw this, we received a couple of dolls from an older gentleman. We're kind of a rural area here,
Right.
and we kind of have become known as this weird bunch of paranormal.
yeah.
Yeah. Normal.
In the abnormal church. And so more than once we've had people just drop by and say, hey, can you come to our house over here? We got a problem. And this guy has come by a couple of times, older guy, and I guess anyway, they'll tell a story. But he left a couple of dollars. And he said these are creating a problem for my granddaughter or something, I don't remember. And so anyway, we gifted them to the gentleman here. And he said here, and this is where he always displays, and it's not always a doll he brings, sometimes it's a mask or some other item that has an attachment to it. halfway, was it about halfway during the show, Kevin?
Yeah, about not quite an hour in, about 50 something, 54 minutes in.
He started it with me.
And yeah,
We had Joe Vitale from Bristol, Tennessee. I don't know if you know Joe or not. And he wasn't with us, but we had him sharing the screen with us here.
Right.
And he was able to watch what was going on. He was using his cell phone. Oh, yeah. And all of a sudden, I saw him tense up. I sat next to him enough to feel, you know. And I look over there, and all of a sudden, his mouth is kind of opened up, and he's pointing one. Joe was telling the story to us, and at the same time, Joe's saying, yeah. And I'm saying, well, what are y'all talking about? But I went back and reviewed the tapes, and the one doll on the right, the eyes started fluttering.
yeah, that's
And
good.
then the dolls moved like they just kind of leaned into each other.
Yep.
Okay? And so it was kind of an interesting moment.
Yeah, it was.
So I wanted to give him, he did subsequent to that, he finally found time to do a Spirit Box EVP session with his two dolls. He is, what do you call himself? A sensitive? He can
Yeah,
get
I got
information.
partially sensitive. I can hold out. Even sometimes I can look at a picture about him somebody gives me and kind of get a vibe off of it if they want to talk to me.
Oh, before we start, we want to say hi to John. We do have our
So,
audience here. Thank you for coming, John. We really appreciate it. And if you have a question or want to pipe in with anything, just do it. So I guess you've got a video queued up over there, but I want
I'm working on
okay. So take your time and introduce what's going on here, Kevin.
Okay. Do you want me
Let me get rid of this.
to introduce the video of the
I've got a video over here that I don't need.
the watch party with this, but it's
I'm gonna let her stream that on Facebook. Okay. So you did this, and you're going to share the video. The video you took was what I took, and you added to it. Is that basically it?
yeah. I started out the video with the clips of the dolls moving on this show, and then went into a spirit box session I did on Saturday evening with the two dolls, where I used the spirit box. Well, I started out a regular EVP to see if I could hear anything, but nothing came of that. But when I turned on the spirit box, I got some responses. And there's a little movement of the dolls too. If you watch your character, you see them wobble a little bit on their own. And,
This is in your house.
in my house, yeah. And what was really awesome, I asked them just to see if I could get a response. I asked, do you know the gentleman whose house you lived in? And the spirit box, they said John twice, which is the name of the older gentleman you're talking about, who the dolls
And
belonged to.
Catherine said that it even said the second time.
Yeah, John, was it John? Yeah,
Okay.
John Duncan, or JD. But yeah, so it's pretty cool. It said, you hear little kids will say John. And then when I asked him again, a gentleman's voice one said, it's John. So I don't know which one had the Duncan tag. I thought I heard something after, and I didn't know it was saying Duncan. And that's pretty cool. That's good confirmation, you know. And
You messaged that link here.
my favorite, though, did you see where toward the end, my cat was climbing up on there? She was playing one up's hair, and I said, "Maddie, leave him alone." And then you hear, she turns, and you hear the voice on the spirit box go, "Get!" And she jumped off the chair. Said, "Get!" So
She got
she took off.
Okay. Catherine, just let us know when you got it queued up.
I am trying to figure it out.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead.
That's the doll we have present.
Okay, we'll do that. This is a very short video.
Yeah.
Stop. Stop.
Yeah, that's
This is
Carla.
Carla.
This is Carla in front of us. I brought her tonight. She's also she's had a history of moving. With her prior owner, she liked to play hide and seek. And with me, one of our team members in my house saw the dog actually lift his hand and wave and drop it back down.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't have a camera running, so we had no evidence. But
How can you be an investigator?
I know she was in there. I think she's got scared so bad she's not on our team anymore.
Okay.
I've got it ready.
Okay, so we're gonna be quiet, and she's gonna stream on Facebook the video, and it's gonna show up on there. Oh, you're gonna have it on my
Yes.
Yeah. So everybody, just sit back. We're gonna be muted, so we can chat if we want to. But go ahead, start the video. This is first of all, let me introduce my part. I took out of that 2-hour segment. You already got it going. They can't hear me.
She screwed you. She screwed you. I changed my Facebook to my $100 to match everything. I'm tired of Patty the $100.
No, he's ready to get it.
Yes. Yes.
11 is coming out.
But he had a different name for YouTube, a different name for website, a different name for
We got it gel together. It's gel.
brand.
Yes.
It's gelling, so it's jello.
Have you seen his video?
I've seen a few of them.
I think that's
Join my YouTube.
Now, what you guys are listening to here is a segment we narrowed. We took a clip out of a 2-hour show. Right. And that's when you'll see. Of course, when she's streaming it, it'll be live video. Okay. What's her name?
Oh, man, he's oh.
It's almost.
They can lean into it.
Yeah. It's almost like a television show.
I can't do that. Yeah, but he didn't think it was good.
It wasn't long after that was the Ace here at walk across there. I mean, walk across the room.
When was that?
After that.
Yeah. We were doing it back in here. Okay, we had a big screen set up and whatnot. So I was sitting here, and Frank, before Frank went back to college, was sitting with us, and had the big screen over here, and Valerius, was the one with us, but he was one with us just on the screen. Right. And all of a sudden, again, I'm sitting next to this one, his mouth goes agape, and he's going, and then Frank's going, I always miss it. I have to go back there. And there was a figure that walked behind our curtains. Not in here, but over there. Because we had curtains, you know. And that freaked them out. So after the show, they did a spirit box for really young. And they got, I guess, a few interesting things with that. But I don't think he recorded it.
Yeah, are you talking about that night we saw?
Yeah, after you saw the figure, y'all did
We
a
got that
investigation.
video, right? Video that disc.
Oh, yeah. So there's been a few little strange things. And you know, when some people have a church mass, we have a church piano. And the you know, cats, our field of vision is very narrow. And cats have a problem. And they'll look, they're like looking at you and saying, what are you looking at? And you know, what the dog has wider audio. And that's the way you get a dog listen. You can't hear it, you know. So if you pay attention to your pets, you sometimes that's best kind of tool you're trying to use, right? But we can't hear the dog here.
When we go back after the video, we use Lewis to have that because I did not have it streaming on the right place. I'm still learning to streaming on.
We changed platforms. because streaming directly to Facebook and YouTube was picking up. And
Yes.
I found a platform I could use, and it's a lot better audio. I'm sorry, I mean, it was Martin.
Oh, yeah.
It's your special interrupted.
Now, have you had any other
Are you
activity
through?
in this building?
Yeah, I mean, did you end the share screen?
No, it's still
It's
going.
good. I'm doing the regular
There has been,
Yes, he lives in the back. Visits.
the area back here is real huge. This was a church before we moved into it.
Okay.
And, it was gutted for another purpose, and then it was given to us. And there has been a few strange things off and on, it's, I wouldn't say it's the most active place around, but if you're in here by yourself late at night, you can, get spooked.
You can do it in the middle of the day.
Well, here.
Yes, he's a black man that wears overalls and a white t-shirt.
Okay.
He likes to bother my refrigerator, and that's usually where I see him, right on the refrigerator.
Wow. Interesting.
He's got energy.
Well, I had someone on that tour last Friday who was, and she kept saying, well, I'm an independent Baptist. I don't believe in any of this. But she goes on to say that her church is haunted. That this independent Baptist church in Roanoke, Alabama. And she said that she was in a meeting in the sanctuary once, and they asked her to go and get the Bible on the pulpit. She walked up and grabbed the Bible, and when she turned around, every one of the microphones located around the altar, they all fell to the floor at the same time. And she and everybody else just took off.
It did sound like a drop in my life.
Yes.
The reality, someone probably tripped the heck of our cable or something. It's usually you group them all together.
Yeah. But they've had plenty of other activity with the giggling of children, and there's one lady, the wife of the youth pastor, who cleans there late at night. She carries a bat with her because she's afraid of what is making all the noise.
There is,
Presuming you can actually sit it.
Yes, yes.
different example, I guess. I think, like a previous conversation, we got a lot to learn.
Yes.
And unfortunately, I think, the world, paranormal research is
I don't have it up right now.
because they don't spread. I've had some fascinating experiences.
Thank you.
And, I can't say what it was. I can tell you, what it's like to be UFO. Unidentified. So, I think, again, it's an open-mindedness to get to it. I know a lot of people get into it just because they love the air factor and the atmosphere. And then people like yourself, are just good.
That's it, right there. That was it right there. Not much.
Oh, man.
Oh, yeah. That's the
I
video we
didn't see
did.
what, I didn't see what kind of water. I didn't see that hard.
Finally got the watch party going.
Now, even though they can't hear us, because I'm streaming on YouTube, they're hearing everything we're saying on YouTube. But she's streaming it on Facebook. I'm gonna have to, how can you go back and do other stuff? Yeah,
This video,
you get watch it.
yeah, Sunday I spent most of the day listening to it.
You hit the
Before I
phone,
made the video, yeah, I put it in
I've got to get it set up.
my earbuds and I get good stereo sound, and I just didn't hear the dumping part.
So,
I had to look up to,
you go on this?
Some, people sometimes introduce me as an investigator. I consider myself an armchair investigator.
Yeah.
I'm much
I
more
did see
rather
your things that you said were came
and talk with people, try to dig into what's going on with them. And, you know, when I have a chance to investigate, I do enjoy them.
Right.
It's just, I don't often have that chance.
So, you've been in here and looked like. Right across the line. Well, I haven't been on a lot of it. The activity, anything phenomenal that happened to me never happened to me.
Exactly. Same thing for me. I mean, I had a full body apparition up here when I was up in North Carolina doing local history. And walked away from my cabin to get some firewood, middle of the afternoon, came back, and there's a woman standing at the door in typical Cherokee dress, standing there looking inside. I see her walk inside the cabin, get to the door, and there's nobody there. That's one minute cabin. So, and that was totally when I wasn't expecting anything to happen.
Yeah. But the same way, I mean, you know, the experience that we had, soft verses, homeless drunk people.
Oh,
Nothing paranormal. I helped us all, her, you know, and gosh, I've been in several situations throughout my life, not consistent like a lot of people. You know, they don't give in.
yes.
But, yeah, I saw St. Louis. A friend of mine was a mathematician. And their apartment was only one way in, one way out, right? He's in his bedroom, and I'm on the couch, and the comfort got me down on somewhere.
Watch party Friday night.
And well, that's the sun was already out,
Friday.
and I was at peace, and I looked up, and there's an apartment there, so I kind of woke up. And in the kitchen was very clearly this young lady with a long haircut and a very long robe. And I thought, oh, the girlfriend must be home on sleeping. And so I just held on and just kind of played possum. And thinking, okay, I'll wait to go back to bed. Whatever. So I lay there for a little bit and I looked at the door and I thought, okay, it's good. I'll get you out. And so I kept waiting for him to come out. And her
She very rarely makes me
he
sleep.
finally came out.
My first had her, I did it.
And so I finally
Yeah, unless she gets back to work, which ain't like it's like a limestone.
I thought there was no one there.
Yeah, Walmart has
And she was not an old, you know, it was current, off the road, very clear daylight. It was like, you know, when you go out there from guys, you're out of there. You know, you're not. And because I was in my underwear, laying there. And, yeah, so I never found an incident. But that was like full time, all daylight, and a big apartment. And on the way in and out again, I'm going. And I did. I was very discreet, you know. Gave him plenty of time for the word to come out before I said anything. He said, you're dressed to go somewhere. It's like, finally, it's like, well, where did she go? That's been years ago, and I remember very clearly. Went to a drumming circle out toward Jasper, Walker County. And group of bookers, whatnot. I love the circle. And I left. I had no more Mercedes for myself. It was so I had to pop down. And I had a long drive, so I left before they totally disbanded. And cutting down to country roads, get back to civilization, and over here, the grass was at least this tall from the ground up. And there's this very pale, thin guy just standing.
Yes, sir. That was a good one. Let's do it.
Oh, and my headlights got him, and he didn't flinch or anything else, and I didn't stop, you know. But I mean, that was very strange. Like, you know, but he was in the grass. He wasn't on the side of the road walking or anything. He was over here, and the dog, they were just pale and the white sheet of it. Yeah, interesting thing. And like I say, I don't try to put entry to it. I just say it's the experience. I can say what it was. That's what I'm not.
Well, I did have my very first investigation. It's like a plantation house in Tennessee. And this was a house that had been, there had been similar amount of property. The house had been used as a hospital and for like months afterwards. But we were in a building in the back of it, remodeled, and they had gathered all of the investigators in this room. And we had a ball set up with the chair in the middle of the room. And our lead investigator said, okay, if you move the ball, we will all leave. 2 seconds after he said, this voice comes from an area of the room no one was sitting, and this kind of tiny little voice says, all of you. And this gasp just goes up in the room. Everybody, and we all heard that. And we got it on audio recorders, and our lead investigator said, well, we made him a promise, so he needs to leave. But I mean, that was just a phenomenal experience.
Okay, we're back on.
We're not ready.
All right. Well, we've been streaming. We've been telling stories for YouTube here. So
Okay.
all right. So we're gonna go back to this, and then we're gonna get into. I'm sorry, Kevin, but we're gonna talk to Lewis in a while.
That's okay.
Can you introduce Liz for me?
Lewis Powell the fourth from LaGrange, Georgia. He is a blogger. I call him a historian, and he does a little bit of paranormal investigation, but I don't think you call yourself really an investigator of that end. More of a researcher.
Yes.
Yeah. Written a book, and I think you got a copy of the book over here. Haunted Alabama. Now, why he wrote about Alabama when he lived in Georgia, I don't know.
Well, people have asked, and my response to that is it's on the list alphabetically. First state among the states that I cover. And at the time, I had most of the sources on my bookshelf. So,
And you're not wrong about it.
right.
Okay, I'm going to come back to you. We're going to finish up what we just did here with this gentleman. Those two dolls, is that the BBPs and whatnot we just heard?
Yes.
Okay. They were gifted to you right here. In fact, you had a lady from Canada that was talking to you about a reality TV show or something.
Yes.
And she wanted you to Skype as we gifted those to you. There was nothing phenomenal happened during that presentation. Right?
It started blinking.
During
And
that
she saw it
presentation?
on the sky, and she was shaking. And I said, "You see that?" She's shaking her head.
Yeah. So
she was excited.
we had a little bit of time between that and when we started this show, and you sat on where you usually set your dogs there. And like you said, within an hour of it started with Joe Vitale up there, joining us from Bristol, Tennessee. The eyes started shuddering, and you saw the video. They just kind of like they were getting intimate with each other, you know, almost. And that kind of blew everybody's mind. And then so you finally got a moment where you could sit down and try to find out some history. What you just listened to, it came with the name John.
Yeah, the former owner, John Duncan.
Okay. And that was exactly the guy's name.
Yeah, they sent it through the spirit box when I asked do you know the gentleman who owned you, whose house you lived in, and they first year the girls must say John. But before that, it said John Duncan, which is his full first and middle name. And then I asked again, his name, and a man's voice came and said it's John. So I guess some other spirit was helping them answer. And then you could see the dolls at one point toward the beginning. They kind of wobbled a little bit in the video. I thought I was seeing things, but it's recorded there, so I guess I wasn't seeing things. So those were good dolls.
Well,
Good additions.
yeah, before we end for the night, we're going to come back and talk about this doll a little bit.
Okay. Yeah,
This
keep a
gentleman,
watch on this one because she might move.
she might move too.
She's a mover.
This gentleman here's a mover. He moved all the way from Lorraine, Georgia to join us. And so we want to spend some time with Lewis here. And Lewis has got some interesting stories. If you've been watching this on YouTube instead of Facebook, you've heard a lot of stories. So if you're watching it on Facebook, you go back to YouTube, it'll be archived, and you can pick up a little bit more about Lewis's story. So you started out, your first book was Haunted Alabama. Right. And I think you've worked with a lot of people we know, Frank, Cat,
Yes.
this character here.
Yes.
And you also, very fascinating, and I haven't had the privilege of being with you, but you give what you call ghost tours, which is basically historical walks in the
Yes.
community.
He's up at the Birmingham tours too.
So that's how you connected,
Yeah.
more or less.
Well, they came to our scare events for then.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
One in the tour. Bus tour downtown.
Well,
So,
we've been Facebook friends for a few minutes,
Yes.
but we met for the first time on August 24th at the house at the park, and we had a chance to talk a little bit about history. You're one of the few in Alabama that knew who the group was James King, vice president.
Yes.
Which you talk about Alabama. They don't talk about it.
That's how Alabama contributed someone to the White House. Yes, they did.
The reason I'm gay.
Yes.
I made a T-shirt. I developed a whole website about it. Because that's like, I never did this in school.
Yes.
And it was fascinating. He named Selma. He co-authored our first constitution. Literally, this man is the founding father of Alabama. When he moved here as a 30-year-old attorney, Alabama was a territory. And his legwork caused to be the 22nd state in the nation. And this is our bicentennial year, 2019. And he served as a senator in D.C. and lived with the forever single Buchanan and became president. So, very fascinating. He's buried in a little mausoleum in Selma. He also owned 500 slaves. That was a common practice back then. But then, when you say 500 slaves, what that tells you, though, is that he was not poor. So his brother, I think, had already moved here first and lived somewhere around. Okay. Cotton was the big industry, so it was booming around here. Cotton fields, and his brother said, "Come on down to the land where it's going to be."
Yes.
And of course, back then also, the state capital was in Holland, and which now are. You get out there?
Yes.
Yeah. In that slaves quarter building.
Yes.
Anyway, which is the biggest building left standing.
Right.
It's boarded up. There's a couple of windows upstairs. They'll have some glass in it if you walk around the building. We've had a couple of experiences. The first time I was there several years ago, I got my digital camera and I caught a figure of a woman in one of those windows. Oh, wow. And then her and I went, and we wanted to do some, I got that 360 camera. You need to go through those cemetery camera and that kind of stuff. So we walked around the slave house. Okay. And we're walking around, and I'm about 10, 15 feet ahead of her. And two white owls
A white owl flies out.
flies out from the eave of the building. Okay. Almost cracked on my body.
The first one flies out. It's kind of scared me to death. The
Right.
second one that flies out tries to poop on him and loses his feather.
Yeah.
And it lands right at my feet. Of course, I picked it up and
She held on to the feather. Now, subsequent to that, I didn't even pay attention to the house. I'm just walking, and she's behind me, so she's noting this more than I. So about the same time this is happening, she hears keys, like a chain of keys. Have you heard this story?
Well, I know the story about the keys.
Well, we did not know the story. She heard this. So when we did our tour and I had a drone and doing some video and whatnot, we went to the guy up in the office up there, and she walked up to him. She says, "What is about the keys?" His mouth dropped. Because we didn't have a clue. And unfortunately, at this point, she didn't say a word to me about what's going on. I was totally in the dark. So you can tell him from there about what the story was, if you remember.
That's it.
No, well, the guy said, "Here."
The guy said something about there used to be a slave there that would steal keys, and he would break into people's houses in the middle of the night.
Well,
There was a Manus guy.
yes. This guy was he was owned by one of the families in town. This is the story that I've always heard. That he was owned by one of the families in town, and they tasked this slave with stealing the keys of the various businesses. And they would go in at night, rob the businesses, and then I think they may have burned the buildings down, or at least covered up their tracks. And to this day, people still have issues with keys. Around, I don't remember the name of the family or the slave, but around his grave, and people have had their keys disappear out of their pockets and things like that. But it's not uncommon to hear them.
And the keys are found on his grave over there in the slaves.
Yes.
Yes.
That's what.
Yeah, that's what.
I mean, it was so loud that it was like someone dangling.
Well, I think you initially thought that I dropped my keys.
I thought he was dangling his keys, but he didn't. His keys were securely in his pockets, and he wasn't wearing, loose pants or anything where you could hear them. And I was far enough away.
And she
it's
was
like-
literally, we walked in, and she didn't tell me any of this. We get up there, and she just walked up to the guy and said, "What about his keys?" And his mouth dropped.
I mean, his mouth was dropped. And
We did not know the story of that.
I had no idea about the keys, and that's what was so freaky.
Now, another interesting little thing, if you've been there since they got the new office there, right?
Mhm.
Okay, they got the bottle trees.
Mhm.
He did not know why they did those bottle trees.
Really?
You know why.
Yes.
Yeah, tell us why.
It's supposed to trap evil spirits,
Yeah.
witches.
He didn't have a clue. He didn't have a clue.
You know why the ceiling was blue?
Paint blue.
The hang blue.
Yeah.
That spirits are not supposed to be able to cross water, which I have some issues with that. But actually, I was in Montgomery several years ago. We went to the Little White House of the Confederacy. And as I'm leaving, I stepped onto the front porch and looked up. Oh my God, it's Hank Blue.
Mhm.
So I ran back in to ask the lady who was in charge, who surprisingly was African American. And I asked her, "Is that Hank Blue?" And she said, "Well, yes, but that's supposed to help keep the insects down."
Yeah. I've heard that too.
And I said, "Well, what about the spirits?" And she's like, "Well, I don't believe in anything like that. But, it's supposed to keep the insects down." I had not heard that until I visited them. But I'm trying to look up it because I know I've got.
Well, let me tell you the rest of the story right over the harbor.
Okay.
That out. Long before this woman came along, I had to take a trip down there. If you go around where the old Civil War prison was, there were still old bricks.
Right.
You know? Well, stupidly, I grabbed one of the bricks, took it home,
Mm-mm.
and I lived on a house.
I can see where this is going.
I lost everything.
Oh.
So I don't know if that brick had anything to do with it. It wasn't heavy enough to keep my boat. But But that was interesting. I hadn't picked up another record there.
There's a fascinating story I heard from Amy Petula, who does the Chattanooga ghost stories.
Mhm.
She was in an antique shop somewhere in the middle of Tennessee, walked in and saw this. It was a 5-pointed star or 6-pointed star, and it was wrapped around the horns of a deer skull. And she saw this, and there were actually two in this little section of the shop. There was one that was sitting down on the floor that was small, and then there was one that was kind of stuck up in the rafters. She decided that she had to have the one stuck up in the rafters. So she went to the front desk, and they called the owner of that segment of the shop to ask if he would be willing to sell it. Initially, he was reticent to sell it to her, and eventually she got him to sell it, so she paid for it. She stepped outside with it, and there was just this sudden downpour, and so she had to run to her car. So she ends up taking this object back and putting it in her shop where she operates the ghost tours from, and she put it up in the shop, and I don't know if it was maybe a year or maybe just several months after that, the building collapsed. And this building had a restaurant in it, had several other businesses. Her business was not damaged. The restaurant was almost totally destroyed, but this building, I think it was a 19th century building, suddenly started showing signs that something was about to happen. They ended up clearing the restaurant, and the next day the building just collapsed into the street. And she ended up having to move her ghost tour office elsewhere. But she took the skull with the star home, set it out on her back porch, and she ended up calling the people who owned the Traveling Museum of the Occult, Dana, I can't remember their names. But anyway, she called them and said, I think I have something you may be interested in. And they eventually came and picked it up, but at some point that it was on her back porch, it actually disappeared. She didn't try to track it down again, but it then returned. And the day that the couple came to pick it up was also a day of just a tremendous thunderstorm rolling through the area at that time. And since she hasn't had any problems in her new building, but you know, she took this. She just had to have that item, and possibly it could have led to the collapse of this building.
You have, of course, written a book on Alabama.
Yes.
So you, and we've talked before, you know a lot about some interesting history.
Right.
Of Alabama. Of all the stories, ghost or not ghost, spooky or not spooky, of all your stories from Alabama, what's your favorite?
That's really hard. I think one of my favorites is one of the stories about Rocky Hill Castle, which was a huge plantation home in Lawrence County outside of Portland, Alabama. And it was a magnificent home. Mrs. Wyndham tells the story that the man who built it, Dr. Sanders, Dr. Sanders brought in a noted architect to build this structure. And after the construction was completed, which took a couple of years, I think, he refused to pay the architect. And the architect left virtually penniless. And he died shortly after leaving, and the architect did. And the family started being plagued by something pounding on the walls of the basement. And of course, Dr. Sanders would go down and check and was not able to find anything. But there's a fascinating story I discovered in the county history regarding this house that some of the later owners in the 19th century, trying to remember the lady's name. I can't think of her name.
He's got a good memory, though.
Yeah.
But this lady was, her sister was coming to visit her. And there had been quite a bit of rain in the area, and many of the creeks were swollen. And so the sister was on her way and was riding in a carriage by herself. And she tried to cross a bridge over a rain-swollen creek and ended up being swept over into the water and drowning. Well, of course, as many of the families in that time were, the family living at Rocky Hill Castle was prepared for the burial. And the sister prepared her sister's body. They probably took one of the doors off the hinges, one of the coffin doors, as they called it, laid it across some sawhorses in one of the downstairs parlors and laid the body out and then covered it with a white sheet. And so this lady, later on that afternoon, is not feeling well, and probably her corsets were too tight. And so she decided to lay down on one of the fainting couches there, and she's probably swooning a bit. And she's laying there, and she glances across the hall into the parlor where her sister's body was laid out. And as she's laying there looking, this hand comes from underneath the white sheet and beckons her to approach. So she gets up off the couch and approaches the body, and she's standing there, and all of a sudden the body sits up, and it's still covered with the sheet. Of course, she's not sure what to do. So she reaches for the sheet, pulls the sheet back, and suddenly the body is laid out as it was. It's no longer sitting up. She didn't see it return to its regular position, so it was almost as if it was just a dream or something. But unfortunately, that house is probably one of Alabama's greatest architectural masterpieces that has been lost. It was sitting and it was being neglected in the 30s when the WPA came through and photographed it for the Historic American Building Survey. But during the time that it was being photographed, they actually, one of the photographers took a photograph of the interior, and you can see a man looking into the camera, standing there on the edge of and he is completely translucent. I included in the book.
You've heard all this.
I think I heard the photo. I didn't hear about the body laid out, but the sheet sitting there. That's my
Right.
first time hearing that.
Right.
I have heard, and I read a more modern book about haunted United States. They include Rocky Hill and the
Yes.
Alabama part. They talk about people still see that apparition that Captain Dr. Wyndham talked about in the antebellum dress.
Yes.
That woman still lingers in that area,
Oh,
even
yeah.
though the house is gone.
And unfortunately, the photographic reproduction is not great.
Mhm.
But you can see
Oh,
the
yeah.
man's face, his collar, and then part of his jacket, very clearly looking into the camera. And this is a photograph from the Library of Congress.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I saw that there. I was on Google looking at
Yes.
pictures.
Now, you're familiar with the house that was right here that burned down recently.
The Shelby Hotel.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I had done, maybe just a year before, I'd done a very detailed video of that inside and out
Oh,
that I've got
well,
on
thank you.
YouTube.
Thank you.
And it was daytime. It wasn't trying,
Right.
even though there was a disembodied voice in that video. I wasn't doing ghost hunting. It just fascinating building. And I walked through and did a very detailed walkthrough of it. Didn't walk around down to our buildings. The building over here was the post office. And then we got called and got interviewed on TV when it burned down.
I could not go up the front stairs. I had to go up when I went upstairs. I couldn't go to the front stairs. I had to go up the back stairs to go up. I was fine coming down the front stairs, but something was not letting me go up the front stairs.
Wow. Now this house had been totally rewired. The inside of this house was very solid. There was no creaking boards. I mean, it was solid. And whoever ended up with a home was going to renovate it.
Yeah.
And then I don't remember, he couldn't get the land perked or some reason, and the county gave him a problem, and he said he had an attitude and just let him sit.
Oh yeah.
There were still new screens and stuff leaning against the wall in there. So however that caught a fire, which I assume was kids from what I got together, it went up. I mean, dry wood. I mean, it just went up.
There was a similar case in south of Chalmette, Louisiana, the LeBeau house. That was a beautiful plantation home that had been sitting empty for many, many years. And someone actually owned it and they had boarded it up. But a group of ghost hunters decided to go in and try to see the ghost. And when the ghost did not perform, they burned the house down. They were arrested, and to my knowledge, I think they're still serving some prison terms for it.
I don't know.
You know October 25th, 26th, our speech
Yes.
down there.
Yes.
We've got a lady out of New Orleans, Sasha, and she wrote an interesting book. You wrote this kind of book. She wrote a book on the liability of those kind of
Oh, that's
very
interesting.
thoughtful book. So she's giving a presentation
Okay.
there, and then the more I got to know you, it's like, why aren't you doing it?
I really wish I could. I already am committed to the States.
Speaking of cryptic audit, it's time.
Oh, she's going to do a commercial.
Okay.
So what did you think of David Merlin, our magician?
I can't say the last time I saw a magic show, but that was really phenomenal.
Well, I know you're gay. I didn't know you were cross-dresser.
Well, welcome back, everyone.
It would have been funny if when he did it, if he went, oh!
You weren't expecting that.
But yeah,
No.
you would have to be in on it to do that.
I mean, that was just, he's got big stage acts.
Oh, yeah.
Like you know, and he was very kind to spend that time. I mean, just.
And I know he was a little upset that there wasn't much of a crowd there.
Yeah.
He's a nice
Having
person,
to, but seeing a magic act in such close proximity, it was so intimate that it really was even more effective than I think it would have been had there been a huge audience.
Well, that poor girl that stuck her hand down in there and feel one thing.
I mean, she had the bell.
And I told him, I said, this just fits so well with the subject, that we're talking about. And I always like that, So. But he was gracious enough to come there and do that for us.
I enjoyed him a lot.
Gosh, are you working on another book?
Well, I keep trying to, and it's just a matter, I get distracted working on my blog, or I'll get distracted with Halloween stuff. I've got tours coming up, and I'm also doing a storytelling session. And so I've got all of that, but I keep thinking I need to sit down and do a Georgia book just like this. Georgia is quite a bit more difficult than Alabama. Part of it is that there are large rural areas of Georgia that are virtually untouched in terms of their ghost stories. So it's a matter of seeing how far I can dig before I can find something, or if I can find something at all.
What I would like, I do a lot of YouTube stuff. I like videos.
Right.
Okay. I'm not very good at it, but I like to.
Yeah.
Bottom line is that I would like to video our old guys
Right.
sitting on a porch or living room telling these stories from their own mouth.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and having a YouTube channel still this instead of even work, you know, of course you could write a book about it, but I just think that storytelling way, you know, I mean, we used to when I was a kid, one of the things we'd hear was old timers, you know,
Yes. Yes.
captivating and really made history come alive. So, yeah, and Georgia, I can see it very differently. Of course, everybody does Savannah.
Yes.
I mean, there's nothing. He had an experience in Savannah. He went back
Earlier this past March.
Where did you have an experience?
I stayed at the Marshall House.
Oh.
And but my, you know, they talk about the human spirits. There, mine was with a different spirit. I felt a cat run across my leg, and when I went on the walking tour later that evening, they talked about a spirit cat that was running several blocks, and I said, "Would that include Marshall House?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, I had experience with him."
Oh.
But he originated from, I think that's what's it called, the Davenport House.
Mhm.
There was a little
yeah.
girl spirit, and they've seen her in the window of the house holding the cat, petting it.
Well, I had a friend who had an experience at the Marshall House. He and his partner were staying there one night, and they were awakened in the middle of the night by a little girl singing. And they said that they woke up and they couldn't tell where it was coming from. And it sounded like she was just getting more and more distant. And eventually she got to a point where they couldn't hear her. So they both went back to sleep, and then she started up again, loud enough that it kept them awake part of the night.
I stayed, they say, I was on the fourth floor. I think it's 413. They say it's really haunted. Or is it 414? I was right next door to it.
Right.
And one night, I was somebody in there, but the night that it was empty, I heard music playing in there.
Oh.
And I loved it. I just had to listen. I thought, "What's the TV on in there watching it?" Or what they doing?
he lives with $300.
But
Yes.
this one, when I tell about this one later, that had a musical thing with it. But I talked to people working there, and they talk a lot about that girl spirit. A lot of people have experience on that second floor, the balcony and everything. People have woken up to her tickling their feet. So I would love that. I definitely.
Oh.
And the you like to be tickled?
I would just that'd be cool to wake up. I would.
Well, I can tickle your feet.
People, things that normally scare people, I would love to see it. Like
Yeah.
Paul's Plantation, I talk about those little girls bouncing on the bed.
Got a
I would
question
love
over
to see
there?
that.
I have John here,
John Worley?
Orly,
Hey, John.
Hey, John.
Just a hey.
Okay. Give it a shout out here. Now in Savannah, the big thing is all the people buried there. Was that the Spanish flu?
Yellow fever.
Yellow fever. Yellow fever.
I love Bonaventure Cemetery.
Oh, yes.
But the park is full of dead.
Yeah, well,
The whole
the
park
streets
is
that they
Oh, yeah, Colonial Park.
Yeah.
That's the one that I went to.
Huh?
The one in Atlanta was the big
Oh, that's Oakland.
Oakland. Yes, there were people out there having picnics. You know, they can do that in the old days.
Well, it's something they recently started at Oakland, tunes from the tunes, where they have bands and musicians set up in or on the porches of the mausoleums, and you go out and, you know, have an enjoyable evening out among the dead.
Well, you go from here on my way back home through Coletta is a little cemetery, and this grave is so decorated. I mean, there's all these solar lights, beer bottles, you name it, and the family, whoever this deceased person is, they have a tailgating thing there every month. I mean, they've been doing it for a while. I don't catch them every month, but sometimes when I'm leaving at night, there'll be a whole bunch of cars there, and they've got the long chairs, and, you know, they're kicking back, and I thought, man, I'm alive, and they don't love me that much.
Well, it's something I think we should return to
I
as
think
a country.
well,
this idea of going and communing with the dead, having a meal, fixing up the cemetery gods. I mean, I walk through these cemeteries and everything is just crumbling, and nobody has really paid any attention to the landscaping, and it's just a mess.
In my lifetime, when I was a kid, my father was a pastor, preacher, and back then, the body would be sent to the mortician, and they would embalm it, and then they would bring it home and lay in the living room.
Right.
And there would be a little shear over it, keep the flies off. And I mean, you would sit in the living room, the body's there, and you're telling stories, and eating, and people bringing food. We've taken all that away. And this is the problem I've got with our culture. We've institutionalized everything. We do ourselves a great injustice with that, because it's like I had a conversation with someone earlier today. The one certainty about life, and the only one certainty is you're going to die. That is the only future corpse right here.
Yeah, see that awesome t-shirt he had on?
She made these t-shirts.
Those are really cool.
So I said, future corpse, and of course, we are the League of Future Corpses.
Yes.
Welcome to the league. As long as you keep the future in it, you're doing okay.
Once you become a corpse, you're done.
Just a corpse.
You can remain in
That's
spirit.
it. That's it. But we have taken away, and we lose a lot. And of course, 6th grade school teacher, the Clinton session always. She loved this. She and 6th grade students history, right? So she was so excited about it that if you sat on the front row, you needed an umbrella and a raincoat because the spittle would come from her mouth. She was so excited. And ugly as homemades. No homemade school. But you didn't think about her looks because she had so much excitement. She was exuberant. And of course, my classmates, Miss Davis, why do we have to study this old history stuff? And she would always say, so we don't make the same mistakes our forefathers did. And as I grew, I thought, wow, politicians should have had Miss Davis for the history teachers. But if anybody ever turned me on to history, it was that lady. Because she made it come alive. She felt it like you do with what you do. And then as I grew in my home state, I reached a point like, wow, I didn't know this, I didn't know that, I didn't know we had a vice president. Oh no, I've heard other stories by some of our stupid governors. And then history became even more important to me because, like, if we don't do something better, we can be very lost. If we're not documenting it, the story about William Rufus the Van King, the Buchanan family had his descendants have spent their careers trying to debunk the gay theory, which is kind of hard to do if you really study the history of this. Yeah. Pretty good.
Especially when the media at that time referred to him as Aunt Fancy.
Yeah, well, and even Andrew Jackson called her Miss Nancy or something.
Yes.
And they never got married, which was very unusual, especially back in those days. It was very important back then to have kids.
Yes.
But if somebody don't keep these things alive, they're forever lost. Especially when you've got certain ones that would just sort of squash it. Those story is history is written by the winners. The losers are just forever lost. Oh, another interesting fact about William Rufus Van King is our only elected official ever sworn in on foreign ground. He was sworn into office as vice president while he was in Cuba.
Oh, wow.
Do you know why he was in Cuba?
No.
Seeking health care. Yeah, TB.
I was getting a cigar.
So I tell people it's not a new issue.
Yes.
Yeah. Unknown fact about it. So, but it's rich. You've got a book here, and that don't even cover a fraction of what
Yeah. And I keep thinking I need to start a second edition. add all of these other places I have heard stories about, and, stories from Kevin.
Oh, you've been to Florence, Lauderdale County. Florence?
Yes.
Yes. There's a bunch of history of my old county life there.
Oh,
And it just goes on and on. We got ghost towns in Alabama. And he's
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma, we talked about earlier. Yeah. You were over there talking.
Alabama's got a lot of history.
oh, yeah.
Where's that?
And the university.
The university, I work with someone.
Montebello?
Yeah. Just went on and on and on about the ghost story.
Well, the center of Alabama is on the steps of Montebello University. The star there.
Okay.
It used to be a few miles to the other side in front of a cemetery. And I guess Montebello needed the attention, so they said, no, it's really over here.
But when they redid the,
I questioned that. I questioned that.
Another most famous story in the University of Alabama,
What's that?
Finding Cunningham, the girl on fire,
Oh, boy.
and the door that still has her flaming face.
I guess Montebello?
Yeah, University of Alabama.
Are you familiar with that, John?
I tried to shoot it around, but to be honest with you.
That's one of my favorites, but I mean,
Yeah.
they bring that door out every Halloween in the library there and tell stories about it.
And I tell that story on my Ghost Walk in the Grange because there's a house there with a little old lady who lives there who believes that that in one of the panel rooms the face of the Virgin Mary was here. And so I tell the story about Tommy Cunningham, the door, and just as a kind of companion piece to that.
Okay. So,
What's Denver, Alabama? The big white house. Everybody says it's haunted. Have you ever?
what's
Yeah,
that?
yeah, the White House on 280 next to Dollar General. Yeah,
Is that the one they use for a venue now?
Yeah.
yeah, they do weddings and parties there. It's
Shelby,
always
Shelby.
it keeps going up for sale because
I don't think I included that.
everybody's scared.
Everybody's scared of it.
They got several ghosts in the
Oh, you
house,
could easily
including
do
the
a
servant boy,
You could easily
the
do a
slave
second
boy.
one.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And there's something scary in the backyard that nobody knows what it is. It likes to mess with people.
Yeah, I do have Wilsonville, not West.
What do you have for Wilsonville?
There was a building that a house that was used as a tea room for a little while. The Densler House, and I drove past it. The tea room closed a while back, but yeah. I don't. Where did that come?
So, Wolf, when you do these stories, you physically went to these places, you took
Unfortunately, I've not had the chance to visit it.
well, I mean, I can see
You read the book?
you've got a lot of stories.
Oh,
You got a lot.
I mean, you would spend a solid year just never going home, just traveling.
Exactly.
So you got to do long distance.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun in there.
And I'm really just kind of starting. I've probably seen 25% of the places I included in here, and I'm still working to try to visit everything.
When okay, let's take a moment.
Okay.
Tell people where to find your blog.
The blog is southernspiritguide.org.
southernspiritguide.org. Now, what Amazon for your book?
Yes, and Southern Spirit Guides, Haunted Alabama.
Okay. Is this your only book so far?
Yes.
So you got to get to it.
Yes, I do.
It's not
Maybe you just need to get it to help you. So, wow.
I have somebody saying that the audio has a lot of interference.
Where are they watching?
I believe so. She sent me a message on.
Because of the fan.
Could be because of the fan.
Let me turn that fan.
Just bear with us. It's gonna be hot.
Those are the fan.
Carry up both the fans would help a lot.
Oh, there's two on. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, there's one over here and one over there.
Oh, there's one over the. I thought that was the loud.
Did that help it any?
Does that help, Christy? I hope so.
I heard somebody answer.
I swear I thought it. I said, yeah,
Okay, John Worley said there's a lot of interference.
Okay.
but is it better now?
You know, I've got a nice microphone, and it's on my desk at home. I keep getting bring it. It's a very expensive microphone to sit here and pick us all up, and that's my fault. I apologize to everybody.
It's fine.
We gotta remember to bring that up here. Try better audio.
Well, this is having good audio so far.
Compared to what we used to do, this has been going real good. So we made some
Yeah,
improvements.
that's the first complaint in a while.
So here's the way you can help us correct this, guys, is buy some books, go to our Patreon account, donate some money. We're poor people.
Please, I got no patronage.
He can't even afford to shave.
I
So
use old butter knife myself.
yeah.
That would probably tear my face up.
That's why the cat comes through your face at night.
Yeah. That gives me
But I got to remember to write that down here. Not even run into a computer, just sit at my desk. So, all right, how many stories you got in that book?
I did 300 locations.
Wow.
See, I told
Wow.
And I could probably easily add 200.
So do you all in Mobile, the coast?
Oh, of course, of course. I tried to get at least one story for every county. I think there were 7 counties that I was not able to find anything for. I have since found stories for 6 of those 7. I still have St. Clair County that's a thorn in my side.
Yeah.
Why is it a thorn in yours?
Because I cannot find anything about ghost stories.
Well, I can give you.
Okay.
Just found it.
In fact, would you be interested in a UFO story?
Possibly, yes.
Men in Black.
Okay.
That's gonna be a story.
Were you visited by these?
I
mountains?
used to live on Simmons Mountain.
Uh-huh.
I've been Oldham, which is
Okay.
Spring, there, and I live in a little cabin out in the woods.
Mhm.
I had my German Shepherd, and there was a deck out here on the porch.
Right.
And very quiet, no close neighbors, very dark at night, no ambient light.
Mhm.
And so one night I had gone to bed, and 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, I didn't pay close attention. I just know I'd gone to bed, banging at my front door. So I threw on my house clothes and went to the door. It's like, dang, this is for me. It's almost like a police waiting to do it on night. And I had a storm door and opened up the other door, and there was this greasy looking character standing there. And he said, I'm here to repossess this little red monster. I said, I don't have a monster here, it's the wrong house. And he proceeded to argue with me, and finally I convinced him that he had the wrong house. Please leave, I'll go back to bed. Never did open up the glass door.
Yeah.
So I went back to bed, and I saw the tow truck. It's record sitting in the river drive there, and went back to bed. No big. I don't know how much later I kind of dozed back off, and again, bang, 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 bang. Went back. And this time I was a bit upset. Second time I woke up, and I go to the door. This time there's 2 of these greasy little characters, 2 tow trucks sitting in my driveway, insisting that I had a little red Mazda they come to repossess.
Right.
And I got pretty ugly with them, and I had my phone in my hand, so I'm going to call the police to get the hell out of here and whatnot. I said, feel free to go back to the property. If you find a Mazda, please take it. I don't have one. I never owned a Mazda.
Yeah.
And so finally they left. I couldn't remember if I actually hit I know I had already put 911 in my phone, do that sometimes.
Yeah.
And I could not remember if I actually hit the send button or not. And but this time out, my heart was racing a little bit after the second visit, and I went back to bed, and I did not go to sleep as quickly as before. And so I kind of laid there thinking, what the hell is wrong with these people, you know? And then sometime later, banging at the door again. Well, this time I'm, you know, it's like, where's my gun? But I didn't get a gun, fortunately. And I go to the door, and there's a series of cars in my driveway. I'm way off the road. It's a dirt road comes up to the property, and there's a series of plain vehicles there, and some guys in suits, literally. 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't know exactly what time it was. Yeah. And I thought, this is a strange way for police to respond to my inconvenience within the night. Well, so this time I felt comfortable enough to go up out on the deck. And as I stepped out on the deck, from the front of the deck, I saw this big front leading edge of this big oval shaped craft slowly moving over. Huge. So huge that there were 2 little black helicopters flying around. And I'm looking at that, and then suddenly I'm thrown down on my porch and a knee's in my back. And the last thing I know is I'm feeling a needle in my neck. And the next thing I know, I'm waking up in my bed. And that's all I knew.
You sure it wasn't a dream?
I woke up grabbing my neck because I could still feel the prick in my neck when I woke up. And I mean, I'm just like, who do you call? What do you do? Like something, you know, rainbow cops. I mean, you know, Oakville redneck cops. I mean, who do you talk to? You know, like, this is all just weird. And so you try your best to shrug it off, but this is like HD quality stuff. It's not like some in and out something, you know. Yeah. And so I just tried to shake it off, and I thought, I don't even know if I want to even tell anybody about this experience. The strangest thing is a few days later, I'm mowing my grass, and I go up by the road, and I'm on my riding mower, and there's a shiny object that's never been there before, and it was a hub from my mom's picture. Don't ask me. But wow. That's all I can tell you. I mean, that is it. It stuck with me eternally. And subsequent to that, I was coming back from the Gulf Coast, the Biloxi area, in the middle of the night. I'm on 2059, headed back to that area. And it was in the middle of the night, and I again witnessed a craft pretty similar, just sitting there over some houses in the middle of the night. So I've seen a couple of things like that. But the Men in Black thing, that was a very phenomenal experience.
They didn't do a very good job racing your memory.
No, they failed.
Not to mention that they conquered you out there to see it.
Now, since you got me telling stories, I'm going to give you a story that is going to. I don't know how to classify this.
Before
Okay.
you tell it, let me tell you something. In Chelsea this past week, or week before, there was a craft spotted over Chelsea. I did not spot it, but it was all over Facebook. Yeah, I didn't see.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out LaGrange in the mid-90s was a hot spot for UFO activity. Over the course of about 5 years, they had something in the neighborhood of 150 different occurrences in Treat County. And it actually became known as the Treat Herd Corridor because there was so much activity. But I have since discovered that, you know, there are still people having all types of bizarre encounters with UFOs or possibly aliens in the area.
There have been, and I'm not going to go deep into this, but subsequent to that experience, there have been instances that made me feel like I was being monitored. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
From afar, not somebody actually following me around. But this experience I'm going to share is, I don't know what to call it, paranormal. I don't know. I'll let you classify it. Okay. Because I haven't come up with a classification. I tried. So earlier in my life, I had a relationship with this woman. Her name was Pam. She was of German descent. And her family had this kind of a weird year deformity. It was over my year. So, it's just kind of something random family. And, like early in life, you have a friend or whatever, and it don't last long, and you go separate ways. And she had ended up somewhere else, married an old high school friend. I was in Nashville. That's my career.
Right.
I hadn't thought about her in years. I home officed there at an environmental services school. And I had the same office number forever. 832-08.
Yeah, I'm on there.
So I was easily found. I certainly didn't have any way to track her down and no desire to track her down. So I don't remember I had to go to Walmart over on Charlotte Avenue in Nashville. I get printer ink or something.
Yeah.
And it's broad daylight, about lunchtime. And I'm leaving the Walmart from the door to go out to the parking lot, and into the parking lot comes this woman. And I try to get her attention. And I'm thinking, what are you doing here? Nashville. And it could not get her attention. She disappeared. So I just blew it off. We all got double, 5 minutes after I got back home at the home office, my office phone rang, and the voice on the other end of the phone said, "Hey, I said, hey." I said, "I thought I saw you today." She said, "What were you doing in Charlotte, North Carolina at the courthouse?" You follow me?
Yeah.
So, I had no way to call her. I didn't try to look her up, and she saying that she saw me in Charlotte, North Carolina at the courthouse where she worked, and I didn't even know where she lived. At the same time that I saw her in the parking lot.
Oh, wow.
I'm shocked that you don't
And
have
she
any-
would not discuss it any further. She shut it down. No conversation.
Sounds like a doppelganger experience. That actually ended differently than I was expecting. I was expecting that the phone call would be that she had passed and that she was a crisis apparition. Like that.
Yeah.
I guess I would
To
classify that
add
as a
to it,
doppelganger.
don't forget that I was at the Walmart on Charlotte Avenue in Nashville, and she worked at the courthouse in Charlotte, North Carolina.
What do you see, Spirit?
There was a wasp up here.
Oh, there it is.
I'm shocked that you don't have any stories from St. Clair County, honestly.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, there is almost nothing written. I did find a cemetery that had been investigated by some organization that had posted a report online, but that was it. Since I published the book, I did talk to Frank Lee, who of course lives there, and his response was, "Well, I'll have to think about that." He later told me two stories in casual conversation, one involving a Dollar General that is supposedly haunted. The other was I think it was like a national chain of department stores that has a location in Sinclair County.
There is
Is it St. Clair or Sinclair?
St.
Clair.
St. Clair.
Well, there's a bed and breakfast up there in Asheville, I believe it is.
Well,
That's
it's
supposedly.
older home.
Okay.
They also do weddings there.
You
Right.
look at the lake that's there.
You got the
And,
Horse Bend Sporty. Getting close. I don't think you're in Blunt County yet. I think it's still safe.
Okay.
You got the lake there, and a lot of people died in that lake when they flooded it because they refused to leave their home.
Now, is that Lake Gunter's?
No.
Oh, okay.
I've heard a lot of stories from down there. I used to work on the ambulance.
We'll have
Okay.
we'll put some together for you.
Okay.
Investigate.
A lot
Here we
of
go.
Native American stuff too.
What is emergency vehicles going by here? That's more than one that went by. Wasn't it?
I haven't paid
I've
attention.
seen red lights go by.
Yeah. That's something going on. Columbiana is the 26th most crime-ridden town in Alabama. Just, I don't know. I do a lot of weddings down at Sterling Castle when we had our February the 9th.
Yes, yes.
And so I'm not only coming to the office, but sometimes I'm just going straight to the castle out there. And more than once, here in this area, you've got a streetwalker. We were doing this show one night, and a girl just busted in the front door, came and sat down.
That was the night I was in the hospital, wasn't it?
You weren't here.
I was in the hospital.
Yeah.
I was on night. Yes.
And she just came in and was scrawny girl. And, how do you mind if I sit here? My boyfriend took off. Okay.
Can you imagine coming and sitting in the their house?
So
Might be scarier than a balloon.
Yeah.
That's what leave in about 10
yeah.
I
So
remember
it is yeah, but there's like a lot of places with meth addicts. We've never had any problem. We need vehicles out here. Spent the night at this building more than once, you know. So we're protected. We have this hedge of protection. Because he gave us dogs and prayer.
I was
Yes,
actually
I
working
prayed
here.
for you.
I was actually working here one
I
night.
prayed for you.
We had the big cutout for Bigfoot, and it was leaned up over here. And I was working over here, sitting in my chair, and a friend was here, and we were talking, and she was sitting in the chair beside me as I was working, and she was kind of looking over my shoulder. The next thing I know, she just kind of slow motion topples out of her chair onto the floor, and I topple out of my chair and smack down on top of her. This is concrete floor; it does not move.
Yeah.
Bigfoot is over here. The fans are not on because it's winter time, and I'm freezing my booty off. And Bigfoot's over going back and forth, and it's like he wasn't laughing at us or he pushed us. You know,
Wow.
that was hilarious. And it was such slow motion that it was like we were almost being picked up and
What do you see, John? You start looking behind you there.
I'm looking at where the cat's looking.
Where's the cat?
probably looking at Caroline.
Yeah.
Oh, did you bring the cat back in?
Yeah, the cat's been on my lap almost the
Oh,
whole
okay.
time, sleeping.
Wow.
She finally calmed down.
A lot of interesting stories. Oh, you were talking, I mean, you know, you got Halloween coming up. You know, Christmas originally was a time for haunted tales.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. What do you know about that?
Well, it's a very English tradition that, you know, when the families would gather, that they would, you know, sit around the fire telling ghost stories. And of course, that was the origin of Dickens' Christmas Carol.
So, and you talked a while ago about the cemeteries, you know, like the bands and picnics and whatnot.
Yes.
There's a lot of culture behind that. And what, so there are, like I said, Calera, there's this family, I guess, this, I say a fairly young father, husband or whatever that passed away. I think looking at the tombstone, it might have been in his 50s.
Right.
And they get together and a big tailgating party was great. The grave was just super decorated. You go by and it's very lit up, you know, and I guess every month they had new stuff, you know. What's your views on that? Is that healthy? Is that a good approach to deal with death?
I think it's perfect. You know, I think so much of our culture now is dealing with shielding people from death. I mean, when someone dies, you know, we send their body to the funeral home and they take care of it.
Visitations for 2 hours.
And, right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Used to be all night at your house.
Yes.
And it used to be on a separate day than the actual funeral, and now it's like,
Oh, they just they rush. You know?
And, you know, it's all designed, as I said, to shield us from death. And I think we need to get more in tune with death, but it also helps not only the family and the friends, but the community.
I think it helps with the grieving process.
Yes.
I think, you know, of course, the tradition of us embalming bodies and dressing them up like that goes back to Egypt.
Yes.
And, you know, but
And there's a a church in Madison, Mississippi, Church of the Holy Cross. It's a Episcopal church they have a notoriously haunted cemetery. But one of the traditions that they have in this church is that the church members dig the graves when they're burying other church members in the church.
Well, but that was when I was a kid. Not only the body was shipped off to the mortician to be embalmed and dressed, put in a casket, but immediately brought to the house and stayed to the house to the day of the funeral. And people stayed. The wake was for like 3 days at somebody's house.
Exactly.
And not only that, but when you got to the graveside, it was customary for the meeting family to grab a shovel and throw some of the dirt into the grave, and participate in that act.
Yes.
And it's just like war. When I was a kid, I'm of the Vietnam age. We, on the news, Walker Broadcast, they didn't shield us from anything.
Oh, yeah.
And so that made us want to stop this freaking war.
Mm-hmm.
Now we sanitize everything about life. And that's the way it is with death.
I have the videos from what was it, Gulf War, that my grandfather taped off of line. Well, they decided it was too violent for us to watch it, and I remember them taking it off.
Yeah. When Bush was president, if it wasn't a flag, they didn't really want to show much of the flag during conference.
Right.
Yeah. But I think I agree with you. I think it's unhealthy to do it the way we're doing it.
More recently, 9/11, I can distinctly remember the principal going on the intercom and saying, "Don't turn on the TVs or anything."
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I didn't find out until like Paul came home and like, "Don't you know what he like?"
So John, how old were you then?
I was in 7th or 8th grade, and I'm 31 now. So
We're almost a teen.
yeah, I was 13, maybe 7.
I don't know. It was just different because of course, my father was a pastor. We dealt with death constantly. And I remember the day Johnny Kennedy got assassinated.
Right.
I was home that Friday, sick, playing with Daddy Ache. I'm laying on the living room floor with my mother's on the couch, and I'm laying on the floor, and all of a sudden Walker cracked back again. It was on TV. The president had been shot, and we weren't even shielded from that. They played that video back and forth and kept you updated, and then all of a sudden, we reached a point to where I don't think they liked the fact that we protested war.
Yes.
I don't think they liked that we saw the ugliness of the protest. I had friends that actually dropped out of school and volunteered to go to Vietnam. One of them gassed himself in a military jeep over there because it was so horrific,
Yeah.
And they did some horrible things.
Oh, I'm sure.
So,
And actually, I think it's the day after I went to your paranormal conference. No, it was the weekend before I had been up in Coleman doing an investigation at Ghost Story there. And the next day went to the Crooked Creek Battlefield Museum and met the guy who owns it.
we stayed in bed and breakfast.
Oh, wow.
That little house.
And,
We did an investigation, and I flew my drone around that area.
But he showed me a photograph that he had that was of a soldier who had, they had photographed him after his death. And it was just incredibly haunting. I mean, this man who is very obviously in a state of decomposition. You can see his hands are kind of curled and they're purple, and you can clearly see the bullet head and the bullet hole in his forehead. And that's just absolutely haunting. And to think that we would have to shield that now, and and this was something that was printed in the paper in the 50s or 60s.
Oh, when they killed Dillinger, one of them. They took pictures of the corpses.
Oh, yeah.
It was all in the papers. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
It was like,
Bonnie and Clyde.
yeah. They didn't shield anybody from anything. It was like, yeah, guess what? We killed him. Look at the bullet.
Going into that place, the battlefield, whatever, Crooked Creek,
Yes.
walking in, there was a lady there, and she was like in period clothing. And I was like, excuse me, I'm sorry. And I went back outside and told the guy, I said, there's somebody in there. And he said, there's nobody here. And he had a picture of her hanging on his little store wall. And he and I were out there talking. Nothing was good. So I think we were getting your drone ready. And he and I were out there talking over toward the where he keeps the stable, the horse-drawn carriages and stuff.
Right.
And a shadow walked right across.
And you know he's got 2 or 3 tombstones out there. There's nobody, none of his family are buried there, but he put their tombstones. I think his wife and his son.
Okay.
I thought they were buried.
No, they're not buried there, but he put the tombstones.
We're talking about the pictures
Now-
and stuff. I've got an encyclopedia of crimes at home with old newspaper photos, and the one that I've had this book since I was young, and the one picture that haunted me was the Lindenberg baby.
Oh yeah.
Found the charred remains of the body of Charles Lindenberg's baby and took pictures of it and put it in the newspaper.
That's it. Yeah.
And that just stayed etched on my
You know,
mind for a long time.
You know, been to so many funerals. I've done eulogies, everything a minister would traditionally do, and my father went through it and whatnot. And to me, the haunting part of it all was seeing some corpse made to look like it's sleeping and having that lid closed. That to me was the haunting part. And then to know, well, we're doing that because actually it started with the Egyptians because they were going to cross this boat to get to the hereafter and whatnot, you know. So it's just really fascinating what we as humans do and the way we deal with life. And really, when you're talking about death, we're talking about life.
Yes.
You know, 100%. I just think it's unhealthy. I think that one reason that we seem to have such this attitude of no respect for life in our society is because of the way we treat death in general. If they, I remember we went through one period, I don't know if they do it now, but when I was younger, they would actually take kids through morgues and show them the corpses. And for the shock value of saying, don't drink and drive, don't speed, don't do this, you know, it's very real.
Well, and even,
Pardon?
Nowadays, you have a lawsuit on your hands.
Well, I hate to say it, and I'm very liberal, but I think snowflakes are low side.
When I was a kid,
You
they
know
made
what?
us go to the jailhouse, and we actually got locked into a cell
Oh, yeah. That it
by
gets-
yourself. I mean, I don't think they do that anymore.
But what's
But
so
it's scary.
strange,
They walked us through a juvenile center. That might have been Boy Scouts. That might have not actually been.
what's so strange about it is in this reality part, we shield everybody from it, but then we go pay for the entertainment value of these slasher movies.
torture porn.
I like torture porn. I
Yeah.
like it. Scary movie.
What's the one, the real slasher one that would chain them up in a room or something?
Yeah, Saw.
Saw.
Yes.
That's horrible.
I can't watch. I watched the first few, and that was
It's like,
I have a roommate who likes those kind of movies. I can't even sit in the next room and listen
oh yeah.
to just the audio.
I tried. That's like everybody was into it. I tried to watch it. It's like, what? You get out of this crap. I enjoy Friday the 13th.
Oh, yeah,
I like
Halloween
the
movies.
I like the classic '80s stuff. I don't.
And even some of the, like Stranger Things and stuff, that it's a lot more wholesome than these just slasher torture.
I'm
Now,
good. Goosebumps.
I watched that when I was a kid.
We've got, Kevin, you said that in December we have a Friday the 13th coming up in
Yeah.
December. Let's start a tradition of the Christmas thing. We started on December, Friday the 13th.
Okay.
And let's tell ghost stories.
Okay.
It's a Christmas tradition. We'll do a special Friday the 13th thing here.
Certainly.
Bring your best ghost stories.
Okay.
We'll dim the lights, light candles. We'll have people popcorn or whatever, you know.
I have a real ghost come through.
Yeah.
We might have one come through.
That
But I think
shoulder
that'd
action.
be I think that would be fun.
Oh, yes. Indeed.
Yeah.
Under the dogs, that little kid one that came through kind of startled me because I wasn't expecting it.
That's the Dawn Moon thing.
I don't know. Nobody's commented on anything.
I'm not forgetting. I'm watching the time here, Kevin. We're going to let you talk
TikTok,
about it.
TikTok, TikTok.
We're gonna go to a
You want to do
commercial real quick.
So you are not working on your next book yet. You just have some ideas.
Yes.
Yeah, but you're staying busy. How frequently do you write?
We went to a commercial.
I work on it every day.
every day. So you work at
There's
home,
the
Yes.
question.
Yes.
and that's not because you want to. It's because you got to do something.
Yes.
That was Spirit Kitty.
But
Spirit.
so, what's your goal? Where are you going from here? What would you like to see for the rest of your life?
Well, certainly with the tours, I have recently become an employee of the Trim County Historical Society.
I saw that.
And I would really, and they're trying to hire me full time as a tour guide and historian.
And this is LaGrange.
Yes, yes. So I'm really hoping that would be the direction I could go, that I could support myself by doing research and, dealing with this history.
I had the idea some time ago because I'm interested. I haven't devoted the time that you guys
Right.
have, but it's always been here. I've got a website I've had forever called AlabamaGhostTours.com,
Mm-hmm.
and I put stuff up there. But I had the idea if I had me neat around Halloween, but everybody says it is, to have a limited number of people that you would take on a statewide ghost tour.
Oh, yeah.
And they would stay this night at this bed breakfast. And you follow what I'm saying? Wouldn't be a big group of people, half a dozen, 10, something comfortable where you'd all fit comfortably in a van, and you could be talking as you drove and go by certain places and get out certain places and make your book come to life. Basically.
Oh, yeah. And that's something that we talked about with the tour company that we were on.
Crown.
And it would have taken a lot of work, and I don't know that it would have been lucrative for the guys
Yeah.
who had to put it all together.
Well, you would have to charge a good penny.
Oh,
That
yeah.
it would be a very what's the word, exotic affair.
Mhm.
In other words, it's not going to be a $25 tour.
A high class affair.
It would be $1,000 a person.
Yeah.
But you're talking about a 4 or 5 day journey
Mhm.
through the state, starting here and hitting the highlights.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah. I think that'd be fun.
Mm-hmm.
Between you two guys, tell the story. And if all else failed, he'd just bring his haunted dog.
Yeah.
I would always take a dog with me on the haunted Birmingham bus tour and scare everybody to death.
Is there anything else you'd like to add? I'm sorry.
And I was going to suggest you could bring enough dolls that everybody could sleep with the one.
Yeah, they would do that. That's shoot. But I tell you, took them on the bus tour, they would, make a nice curve around the seat where the dog was.
Will you?
I'd mess with them. I'd say, if we'd get off, I'd say, we'll come back on, the dog's in a different seat. Just let me know, I'll come get it.
We got over here, Sweet Haunted Caroline.
Yeah, the case.
Right here.
Okay.
She's got her own YouTube channel, and she's live streaming constantly.
Oh,
And so anybody that sees a movement will let us know.
okay.
And we grabbed the movement out of it today, in fact. I'm posting. But we have to watch him because more than once he's tried to steal.
I was messing with her. I said, kidnapper.
But,
Elizabeth wanted me to.
Elizabeth begged him to.
Oh,
She
yeah.
wanted me to.
Her daughter caught it moving and freaked her out, like 16 years old.
Yeah, she was banging that there in that
She slept in the car that night. The dog, not my child.
Nothing else to add to this? You want anything? The name of your website?
Website is southernspiritguide.org. And my book is Southern Spirit Guides Haunted Alabama. You can find it on Amazon. You can easily find me on Google by just typing in Southern Spirit Guide.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. You working on blogs all the time?
Yes.
I'm sure you got them all archived.
Oh, yeah.
So, okay. And they're all stories like what you have. How do you come up with that constant flow? I mean, they can't all be coming from Alabama. They got to be.
Oh, well, I cover 13 states, including the District of Columbia and Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, and West Virginia.
Okay.
And
We got our stories to draw.
yes, yes, I have a library of at least, I think at last count it was at over 600 volumes covering those states.
So you buy other people's books.
Yes.
So you do,
And I'm constantly looking at news aggregators online to find ghost stories, printed papers, anything like that. You know, of course, watch many of the programs on television, which are not honestly great, but you know they can provide at least hints of information. And also just talking to people. I'll occasionally get emails from people with stories. I'm constantly watching Facebook looking for the next story. And for me, it's a matter of taking these disparate stories and putting them together to, give them context to make sure they make sense.
Yeah.
Especially if you have a story from Savannah, and this is a place that's just surrounded by other stories. I can tie all of these stories together.
So, when did you start this?
I started blogging in August of 2010.
So you have these stories.
Yes.
Decades worth.
All right. I want to let him tell us about this doll, which he's
Yes.
not talking about.
This is Carla. She comes all the way from New York, and she was
New York.
about I would say the 8th doll in my collection. So I've had her at least 5 years, more than that, maybe.
Her hair's kind of rough.
Yeah, she's almost 100 years old. So, and in fact, she came to me naked. I had to buy her I bought her that vintage dress off of Etsy to put on her. The lady she came from, Kelly, didn't keep her long enough to. Kelly bought her as the interest of an antique doll. She's gonna take her to a doll hospital, get her fixed up, and buy her clothes, and then strange things started happening in the
When I
house.
look at this doll, I'm looking here at the screen, but I see dark.
Yeah.
I see very dark.
If you look at her mouth, you can see little teeth in her mouth. This one was made with little teeth in her mouth. And one of those really rare combo dolls.
So what's your history with this?
Well, fixed to tell.
Oh, hurry up.
Mr. Interrupter. Corpus Interruptus.
Clock's ticking.
Kelly, when she got in touch with me, she had been trying to sell the doll.
Wait a second.
And
Catholic Church, I think the same. Right?
yeah,
She made her what kind of dog?
there wasn't any.
Now, what were you saying?
Oh,
Somebody's
she's a composition doll, so she's made out of different types of paper and stuff. I think inside she's stuck with some newspaper in there too. And this lady lives in New York. It's where the doll came from. When she bought the doll, she gets it on. She had it sitting in a chair in the front room. Hadn't done anything with it yet. And it wasn't just a few days later, she came home from work and the chair was empty. She goes looking around in the next room. The doll is sitting on a different chair. So nobody lives with her. Well, she moves it back to where it was. The next day she comes home, it's not in that chair. She goes and looks, it's not in this chair. Goes in, it's on the bed in her bedroom. Well, this continues for a little while. There's a different spot every time. Then it gets craftier and craftier. One day she came home and searched around and didn't see it, and then she heard a noise under her bed, like a shuffling. She lifts the curtain of the bed, and that doll's laying there staring up at her. She's getting very apprehensive about this thing and doesn't know if she's going crazy or if this is really happening. And the last straw was when she came home, couldn't find it anywhere, even in the bed, and finally gave up and went to do the laundry. She took the clothes out of the hamper, and on the bottom of that hamper, those clothes, guess what was there? Carlos.
So how did you end up from New York to this dog?
Was trying to sell it on eBay, and they're trying to get somebody to buy it, and some people buy it. Everybody was scared of it. Her friends were scared of it. Just like most people, she got in touch with me on my Facebook page, and wanted to see if I would like to take it and take care of it. She goes, I don't have any clothes for it. I'm not touching this doll any more than I have to. I said, okay. I said, go ahead and send it to me. She did. Real quick, that doll came, and when the first night I had her in that house, again, this is long before I had the massive collection. So what is now the doll room was just a library with bookshelves and a big food chair. I had her sitting on the food chair, and I closed the door so the cat wouldn't go in there. I wake up 1 o'clock in the morning later that night, and I'm sitting there, I'm hearing something, I'm listening, and I hear music. And the best I can describe it, it sounds like Clapper Girl music. Back in the 20s, those dancing ladies, the Clapper Girls, and music that would play. And I go, where is that coming from? And the cat's laying there with me. She's looking around. And I get up and I go out in the kitchen, turn the light on. I'm hearing it. And I realize it's coming from the other side of the house where their room is, where she is. There's nothing in there, no TV, no radio, nothing electrical that should come on to play music. So I start walking that way, and I'm like, am I half asleep? Broke my mind. I'm hearing it. But then I realize I cross the great room and get to the little archway where you go into those rooms there. As I get closer, the music gets fainter and fainter until I get to the door, and I push it open, and it stops completely. I look in there, she's laying back in the picture with her head turned, looking my direction at the door. I said, I want to find out more about this. So my brave self, I get her and I take her into my bedroom. That's where I've kept her ever since. But I've never heard the music again. So I don't know if that was her way of drawing herself close. Maybe she wanted to be in my room and she wanted to draw herself in there.
Well, over the course of this year, I think you missed one Tuesday night with us. And
Maybe two.
You have brought a lot of different dolls in here.
Well, I wanted to mention, too, one of our investigators, every year I have one party where my paranormal team, Scarab, Alabama, shout out, comes over. And one of the people that used to be with us was in the room by herself, looking at that doll real close, at her eyes and little teeth. And she swears to me the arm lifted up and waved at her and dropped back down. I said, did you had your camera or something? No, it just all of a sudden. And I was scared. I was paralyzed. I haven't seen her move.
See, we've got our camera.
Yeah. My camera's constantly drained. Every time I try to set the camera at night, it drains.
I've always wanted to know, do you ever have problems with the spirits interacting with each other? I mean, do you have spirits that perhaps don't like each other, or?
So far, nothing audibly has happened. I did have two of those dolls. One that Laura I brought over now that's sort of a life-size French girl doll, and the one with the green eyes, Ashley, used to be in a room facing each other, and they were always kind of eyeballing each other. And Wanda, our highly sensitive team member, came over one day and she says, those girls are having a little bit of turmoil there. So I separated them, and everything's been fine.
What would be very fascinating, because you have, of course, not just the dolls, you have an abundance of dolls, but you also have other haunted items.
I have paintings too.
I mean, it's just like we've got this girl on a live stream 24/7, which is not that hard to do, but it's like, I would want to know what these dolls are doing while I'm not there.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I need
Have
to-
you ever thought about
Yes, I thought I need a fancy,
Because-
fancy camera just like that.
That's at $40.
And dang, see, I didn't know that. I expected
And
it was
now
probably a
we-
couple $100.
We've got the microphone cut off, but it does have a microphone, so you can do audio.
Dude, I could do it in that doll room when the door closed with the light left on.
Mhm. And
It
you
wouldn't
can,
bother
and
me.
then you can monitor it on
And do
your
it
cell
live
phone.
on YouTube. I've got to do it by George.
I
Get
actually,
with it.
I'm actually putting LED lighting in Caroline's case.
Yeah, right now, because it gets so dark in here, we're leaving the lights on 24/7. But and today somebody did see a movement, and I went back, and sure enough, there was movement in his doll. And if you see, it's in there. And have you seen it closely?
I didn't take a look at it.
It's in the
on the
case, and
screen
it's plexiglass over.
Okay.
Okay, so no wind or anything, you know, affect it. Yeah. And of course, these floors are concrete, they're not gonna shake or whatever. But,
My biggest fear was that spirit would knock her over.
yeah,
So
I was-
thought I needed to
he's
check.
fascinated with this girl.
Yeah, I was-
But what I started to say was, all the dolls that you've brought, for the weeks and weeks we've done this is the darkest doll that I've seen. I mean,
Yeah, there's
really,
this
really,
She had a,
really dark. I mean, and I'm not talking about dark as like black, I'm just
yeah,
feeling of this
yeah.
dark.
When I first got her, my friend Sherry Richardson, who's also a medium, kept saying she was picking up. Now, the way I got the name, I do have a spirit box session on my YouTube. You just look up Carla Spirit Box Session. And she has just a couple of minutes, and she says her name is Carla. That's how I got the name. I asked her where she's from, and in her New York accent, she goes, New York. So she's from New York. She's about, what she says, 7 years old. But my friend Sherry told me that she picked up that Carla was very frightened from something before she died.
Mm.
And maybe that's why she kept hiding herself in the last owner's house. But with me, she's a little more comfortable. She hasn't hidden, although I would have loved to find her in the bottom of my hamper. I mean, can you imagine?
You almost need security cameras throughout your house
I
just
have-
to.
Yeah, I had one I bought a little cheap when I bought online that I would set up in different rooms, but all I can do is monitor myself. I can't do a live feed on YouTube. I need to get one of these here.
It's not, yeah. Now, the platform we use is called StreamYard. And it just works a lot better than just going directly to YouTube or directly to Facebook.
You have to pay for that service.
Ain't nothing free, buddy.
There's a couple of things free that you just have to order.
Yeah, I mean, you
Yeah,
can do free versions of stuff, but there's always some, they gotta make money. I mean, so they'll either have it branded or
Then there would, and I could,
run ads through
then
it.
there would just use my laptop, look at laptop streaming live on YouTube.
I personally don't like Skype or Hangouts. I've used them both, but for this kind of stuff, I wanted something more dedicated for this purpose. You know?
Well, it looks like the YouTube feed is much clearer than
Yeah,
Facebook.
that's what that is. So I want to do YouTube. I figured just hook the camera up to my laptop and run it live.
Okay, you got 3 minutes
Back,
to tell people where to run
for
your
hours,
hours.
hours, hours wide.
MyHauntedDolls.com. Just go to MyHauntedDolls.com. I've got all my books out there.
Bring your books.
Yeah, I forgot. Y'all want me to bring my books in?
That's okay. He's
I'll
got a
do it
bunch of
next
books.
week. I got 10. Book number 11 will be out next month. If you want to help my YouTube channel, go to patreon.com/MyHauntedDolls. My YouTube channel is My Haunted Dolls. You can search it with my name, Kevin Kane, on YouTube, or just follow the link on my website. And I got a slew of videos of different sessions, evidence capture, stories about the dolls.
And you also do a little audio blog type thing.
Yes, I do an audio podcast every couple of weeks. You can find it on myhauntedDolls.com, courtesy of Podbean. I like to treat it like the radio. I always wanted to be on the radio, so it's like a radio thing. And I tell ghost stories, scary stories, and try to outdo myself every
He wants to
time.
be a hard man.
I want to be Catherine Tucker-Leonard, just the male version.
Well, I really appreciate you guys. Kevin is with us all the time, pretty much. Yeah, you are just thank you so much for coming down.
Thank you for having me.
And
It's been an enjoyable
we've had
dance.
a good conversation on here and out of here too.
Yes.
And learned a lot. I enjoy learning from people, and I love these stories. To me, the historical part is great, and whether you believe in the supernatural or not doesn't make any difference to me. There's still fun stories.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I think he's a skeptic over there. He's like, this is not true.
Well, she should have been here when the dolls moved. A couple of weeks
Yeah.
ago.
I swear that one keeps on looking at me just a little bit.
Yeah.
I swear I've seen the head through this.
That's possible. I mean, really and truly, you ought to get on his YouTube channel, folks. My Haunted Dolls, Kevin Kane, and he does these EVP spirit box, and we did have to educate him on the difference between EVP and
It's
spirit
both
box.
electronic voice phenomenon.
But it's a phenomenon, phenomenon.
But so he's got a bunch, and he's always doing new YouTube videos, doing EVP sessions with these dolls. The spirit box is more fun because
Yeah.
you get instantaneous
Mine
feedback.
seemed to like, my spirit seemed to like it better than
Yeah.
trying to do regular EVP.
So support him. And Lewis has one book,
I got 10, he got one.
so just buy 10 copies of one book. They make good
10 to
gifts.
1.
Halloween's
Yes.
coming up.
Yes.
They make good gifts. Good Christmas presents too.
Yes.
If
we're
you-
we're on
if you-
Amazon, Barnes and Noble.
Do you have a Patreon account as well?
No,
Yeah. Yeah, do it.
I've considered it. I just,
I've got one. Don't use it. My YouTube stuff's not even monetized. I don't make any money. All this stuff. I spend a lot of money. Yeah. But to me, it's like I said, we don't have the answers,
right,
but we know the questions, and
yes.
we keep looking. I like Frank Lee because he's got that mindset.
Frank Einstein.
Yeah.
I call him Frankenstein.
Frankenstein.
So thank everybody for joining us tonight. We should be back next Tuesday night. And anytime you're in the area or you want to have a special journey, we would appreciate it. And,
Sure. I'd love to come back.
these guys are fascinating storytellers,
Well, thank you.
and we really enjoy it. And whether you buy one of his 10 books or all 10 of his books, or whether you buy his one book, he's got 300 stories in there.
300 locations.
Locations.
That's not exactly an easy book to write right there.
So we're going to try to give him some information where he can start on his next book, edition 2.
And finally get St. Clair County.
We're coming up on the big Halloween season, so keep that in mind as you go through your stuff, because I'm sure his vlogs will be very interesting.
Yes.
And not only do we have a Crypticon taking place in Orange Beach, but y'all got other things going on in the meantime. He's always pumping out stuff on his YouTube channel as well.
Yes.
Our YouTube channel, everything we do is Abnormal Alabama, and now you know why we got Abnormal. Don't think you question that.
A new book, Crimson, The Haunted Painting, comes
There you
out
go.
next month.
You coming along good with that?
Yes,
Good.
it's coming out next month for Halloween.
And then these guys are going to co-author a book about Sweetheart.
Oh, that should be easier. We've already got stories written. I can just build off that.
What about the 2 new dogs? You need to do a book on them.
I'm going to
Considering
include
what
them.
they did,
I'll go ahead and include them in that. I was going to do the sequel book, My Haunted Collection, The Dark Side.
the dark.
Even though they're not evil, still that's creepy as hell. So
I'll never. I mean, you were doing but Joe has just got his cell phone up here streaming to us, and when he points it out, Joe's in the middle of a
he
conversation.
goes,
He's in the
yeah,
middle of a conversation. He's got, yeah.
10 seconds ago, 20 seconds ago.
So you need to tune in every Tuesday night because guess what? You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You never know.
Oh, December 13th, we're talking about doing something
Yes.
here, guys. So
Yes.
you bring in the beer.
And see, we're going to celebrate my birthday on December 13th.
There you go. And my birthday is December 1st.
But mine's actually the
What's your
10th.
birthday?
October 5th.
That's great.
Yes.
January 19th.
Just-
Crickets chirping. Look at the crickets chirping over there. I'm a New Year baby.
You're not.
All right. Thank you all for joining us. We're going to shut this down. I apologize for being so tired. This is
Good
long.
night, everyone.
Oh, yeah. Go on.
So say good night, folks.
I wanted to commercial.
She's doing a commercial. I'm shutting YouTube down.
Are we done?
That's it.